It being 10:05, I hereby call this hearing to order. Today we are going to be holding a hearing on a request for an emergency revocation suspension of the extended hours permit for Razzles on 611 Seabreeze Boulevard. This action comes out of section 10.10b of the city code, which provides for extended hours permit, and specifically subsection 11, which provides for emergency revocation, suspension, or restriction of an extended hours permit by the chief of police. I have been provided with a letter that was apparently sent to or provided to Razzles, dated August 10 of 2023, which set out the explanation as to why the emergency revocation suspension was being invoked. And at this point, is my understanding of the ordinance that this action alone has suspended the permit, with the proviso, however, it is only good for, I believe, 4 days, with an intervening hearing, at which time some of the issues can be hashed out as to whether it's a revocation, it's a termination, whether it is to be dismissed. Any number of things can occur at this hearing. Whether, in fact, additional conditions can be added as a provision in lieu of revocation or suspension. There were 4 grounds that were listed in the notice that was provided to Razzles, and I'm not going to go through them. The council, you probably are well versed in what is being alleged in these grounds. Now, the first question I have, Mr. Jackson, are you ready to proceed with the city's case?
Yes, Mr. Joya.
Okay. Mr. Delgado?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you ready to prepare whatever it is that you will be providing in response to the city's case?
We're ready.
Okay. Question 1 I have for Mr. Jackson is, has a proceeding of this nature occurred in the past? So that we have some basic rules as to the manner, because it comes out of an ordinance which provides for certain things to occur at the hearing, but it doesn't really elucidate the manner in which the hearing is to take place.
Mr. Riggio, I'm unaware of a prior proceeding where we utilized these provisions of the extended hour permit.
Okay. Well, I am, first of all, I would like to get you and Mr. Delgado to agree on a procedure. I am looking at subsection or provision, it's subsection C of 11, which says that my decision is premised upon substantial competent evidence. And so, first of all, substantial competent evidence needs to be provided in the course of this hearing for me to make a decision. Is the city prepared to go forward and provide that? It'd be sort of whatever you are going to be providing to allow me to have what I need to make a decision.
Yes, the city is prepared to proceed with substantial competent evidence.
Okay, so what I would like to do, and provided that Mr. Delgado, you find this, is that the city present its case in chief, so to speak, with respect to the grounds by which it is seeking the remedy that it is asking for. And that will mean calling witnesses, providing whatever it is, documentary evidence, whatever it is that you have to support your case. And Mr. Delgado, you will certainly have the opportunity to object. If there are witnesses called to cross-examine them, it will be just a regular hearing with witnesses, at which time Then I guess, Mr. Delgado, if you have witnesses, you will be able to call them and ask them any questions you so desire. And Mr. Jackson, you will also have a right at that time to cross-examine those witnesses, at which time both of you will then be given an opportunity to sum up your position on this matter. Is that agreeable?
That's agreeable. We do have some, at least I have some thought of presentation not necessarily being at the level of a formality of strict questioning and answer, but presentation of in a manner which is more common for us with our administrative proceedings.
Okay.
Which would be Sergeant Blowers bringing forth a presentation and obviously open to inquiries by the magistrate as well as from the counsel, Ms. Delgado.
Okay. Remember, Mr. Jackson, the provision in the code provision says that I ultimately have to make my decision based upon whether there is substantial, competent evidence supporting a finding. Now, that's kind of a loose, somewhat loosely area of evidence, but it still means that you're going to have to present something that rises to that level for me to make my decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was saying, it's really the same review standards that's consistent with our other administrative proceedings.
Okay.
To start, we have provided.
Well, let me just.
Yes.
Let me just. Do you wish to each of you make an brief opening statement, and then you can move from there and then move into your case in chief?
Yes, Mr. Magistrate, our intent is just to do just what you expressed. We would just express our the evidence that supports the chief's decision to exercise the authority that was granted to him by the code under subsection 11 of Article 10-5 it is, I believe, 10-3, whatever the number is.
It's actually 10 dash, I believe it's subsection B11.
It is 10-3, subsection
B11.
Yes. So, yeah, I would like to have us present that. Our grounds, the recognition of the need is to ultimately, as it says in subsection 11, as it concludes, our responsibility to show you what it would take to alleviate if we ultimately make a decision on conditions or what it would take to whether or not the suspension should continue. So
I think it can also be revoked as well.
Absolutely.
One of the remedies available.
That is one of the remedies. Of course, that's not the one we're asking for, otherwise we wouldn't be holding the hearing. So at least from the perspective of the city. So with that being said, the only thing I would have to offer in addition to that is that we have presented to all parties a binder of our evidence, and I don't know if Mr. Delgado has any objections to a simple composite entry of our packet that has been provided to them, obviously for court's review as well as the one that we'd be utilizing. Do you have any objection to the general composite entry of that? The reality is everything that we would be presenting that the magistrate actually views would be my position, would be deemed evidence for any subsequent review.
Well, I mean, obviously hearsay and those things are admissible to some degree of these proceedings, so I mean, I don't have an evidentiary objection, so you're certainly welcome to give the magistrate whatever documents you want him to review at this point. I don't have an objection to that.
What I'd like to do is I'll move this into evidence, Mr. Magistrate, recognizing that this has been delivered to magistrate as well, and just move it by presenting it to the Secretary of the Magistrate proceeding.
And that would be an exhibit in this proceeding.
Yes, that would be an exhibit, which should be represented by copies that have been provided to all parties.
Maybe we'll make that Exhibit A.
I don't know if Mr. Delgado have anything that he wanted to present, but we're ready to present if there's nothing further from through
Well, I think
Sergeant
Mr.
Blowers.
Delgado will present anything after he's heard your case in chief.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
By way of initial remarks, if I may, we were served with this emergency suspension last weekend. My clients have been, their family has owned this establishment for almost 40 years. So they are incredibly invested in the community, and they want to be good partners to the city. So we've been in extensive talks with counsel for the city about trying to resolve many of these issues. I mean, we understand that there's a concern in the community about the Seabreeze corridor. Our clients kind of have an iconic location there, and Razzles is kind of a shorthand for that entire downtown area in a lot of ways. And that you can even see that in the documents the council's presented, that some of the calls for service, they may say Razzles, but when you read them, they're actually other locations, because I think that's just kind of common parlance for that part of town. You're going to hear that we've already undertaken a great deal of additional security measures above and beyond what's already happening on the street. Last year, my clients, at their own expense, put in metal detectors. They've also gone and got a Real ID compliant IntelliCheck scanner at their own expense, so that they'll be able to scan IDs. It's the same degree of verification that law enforcement uses, because obviously the modern fake IDs are so good that it's very hard to tell. So this is something that they've done, and they've already signed a contract at considerable personal expense to do that. So they were already trying to ameliorate the concerns that the city has raised. And we're going to be asking that you terminate the suspension or modify it in a substantial way to allow us to reopen as soon as possible. You're going to hear that they already have training in place. They're going to have additional training. The main points of contention, I think, are going to be, three real areas. The first is that the city had asked us, going to ask you to restrict baggage of any kind coming in. We've kind of discussed back and forth. That's just not really practical. I think more than half of the customers going into Razzles are going to have some kind of bags with them. We do have security. We do have magnetometer at the front to check. I understand that one of the things that prompts this is the city's concern over the shooting that occurred 2 weeks ago. I would point out that that shooting occurred before midnight, and it was not someone under 21 who did it, and that person also broke several state laws and committed several felonies by smuggling a firearm into a bar, which is illegal. But we've already implemented better security measures. Now we're going to do a more invasive search of people's property as they enter the premises. There is going to be signage up advising that, which is something the city had asked for. But we believe that with more intrusive testing and more intrusive checking, that's not going to be an issue. I mean, you can't prevent all crime. You can't stop someone who's hell-bent on smuggling something in. Something's going to sneak through. We're not the TSA, but we're going to do everything we can to do that. As far as the bags go, we're asking that either you lift that restriction or impose some sort of reasonable definition of a handheld bag so that people can bring in their driver's license, their car keys, cosmetics or hygiene products. Obviously not backpacks, duffel bags, things like that. We understand the concern is that weapons could be smuggled in. We're going to be doing everything we can to stop that. Perhaps clear bags or something like that. If we have to have some restriction, we'd like it to be a reasonable one that doesn't alienate half the guests coming in. The second concern the city raises is they wanted us to change our business model to being 21 and up. Certainly, the city could adopt that as part of their ordinance if they chose to do so, but that isn't what they've chosen to do. And if we just single out one business on the street and impose that, it's going to be an unfair advantage to the other establishments, and all you're going to see is people are going to congregate at a different place, but it's not going to change or alter it if there's still people under 21 able to get in across the street. So we'd be asking that we just be allowed to continue operating business as usual in that regards to under the terms of the permit from midnight to 2, but let us implement the additional security measures. If we have more security and we have the better ID checking, that's going to eliminate any of the fake IDs or most of the fake IDs.
Mr. Magistrate, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Delgado. I have a lot of respect for Mr. Delgado, but I think we're kind of putting the tail before the horse. We haven't presented what we're asking for.
I think
other than
what I hear is Mr. Delgado is presenting some things to try to ameliorate the problems that have been alleged in the materials.
Right, so that way Mr. Jackson knows what our real objections are, and he can tailor the presentation of evidence to that. I mean, there's 9, he had a list of conditions. I was trying to kind of say we are willing to or have kind of conceded that we can do more in some of these areas, and we're already voluntarily doing that.
I understood. I understand.
And then, so those are our main contentions. The last one is just we would like assistance from the city to have police officers available, and we'll speak with law enforcement about doing that. They wanted us to have private security. We would love to have more security. We'd love to have police officers there for their details, and we'll present evidence as to why that's been difficult for us in the past. But at the end of the day, we want to be good corporate citizens. We want to be good partners. It is a bar. It has been a bar for many years. We want to be able to continue to operate as a safe bar and to be a good partner to the city and to the police. But some of these restrictions that we believe the city is asking would put us at a real disadvantage and are not necessary to affect the concerns that they raised in their emergency suspension. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
And as I said before, the city's ready to proceed, and I would call Sergeant Blowers.
Please do. Will you swear in the witness, please?
Could you state your name, please?
Sergeant Timothy Blowers.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Magistrate. We are here before you, sadly, as the issue demonstrated danger to the health and safety and welfare of the public has been forced the city to take action. Per Daytona Code of Ordinances, Chapter 10, Section 10.3, subsection 11, an extended hours permit is subject to emergency revocation, suspension, or restriction of an extended hours permit by the chief of police. The chief may, without hearing, revoke, suspend, or restrict a permit holder's privilege to an extended hours of operation as provided in the subsection. The establishment's operation presents a demonstrated danger to the health and safety and welfare of the public, which it has been. It should be noted that the extended hours permit is a privilege. It's not a right. The grounds for the suspension are as follows. Recently, July 22nd, 2023, there was a shooting where a female patron brought a firearm into the business and later shot 4 individuals in the business parking lot. This had the potential of a mass casualty event. We have video that can be played where the lady goes into Razzles, goes through the metal detectors, sets off the metal detectors, and continues on. We also show the fight in the parking lot where there was nobody out there security-wise, and then it escalated to where the shots were fired. There's also been over 13 calls resulting in numerous injuries and arrests at the business since May 1st, 2023. And in the packet submitted is call history for Razzles in itself. There's been numerous complaints from parents that Razzles employees have allowed minors in to serve alcoholic beverages at the bar. These complaints have come in through dispatch, has come to the chief's office, to sergeants. It has come in from multiple places. In the past year, there have been over 121 calls for service about underage drinking / fights, intoxicated individuals, shootings, trespassers, and illegal parking, to just name a few. And in the packet provided, I showed all the call history detailing what these calls were. Since the original grounds of the emergency suspension was drafted, but before it was served, Friday, August 11th, 2023, shortly after midnight, officers arrived and was flagged down in reference to a female passed out in the bathroom of Razzles. Razzles staff carried her out of the business, put her on the sidewalk, then flagged down officers. After that, the female was in and out of conscious and ended up being transported to the hospital as a Marchman Act. It should be noted, this female was under the age of 21. While officers were dealing with that intoxicated female, there was 2 other females passed out on the ground in the parking lot of Razzles. And I have photos and videos of it if necessary. Later that night, August 11th, near the closing time, officers responded to a rear parking lot of Razzles in reference to a disturbance. Officers responded to the area, and 2 officers were struck by a 16-year-old female who was intoxicated after leaving Razzles. She had a Razzles entry stamp on her hand. After striking the officers, she then struck 2 more individuals, resulting in a total of 4 people being injured, with 1 being transported to Halifax Hospital. And I have video of that incident also, which was presented to everybody. Other relevant calls regarding safety concerns, August 5th, in regards to a disturbance resulting in an arrest for disorderly conduct. There are numerous calls where barriers occurred, and even if they don't call on the night it happened, they call and report it the next day, and some of these have serious injuries. Just to name a couple of the events where parents have called in to dispatch in July, event number P23-204-1516 on July 23rd. Parents called in to complain about underage drinking. Also, P23-211-0877. Another parent called in complaining about underage drinking. It is clear from the number and severity of incidents that have continued to happen at Razzles that immediate action was required. Fearing for the safety of our residents and guests, Daytona Beach Police Department suspended the extended hours permit on August 12th. Daytona Beach strongly recommends keeping the suspension active until Razzles takes additional security measures. Some of these conditions consist: no bags of any kind to come inside the business. Signage for notifying patrons of the following: no bags, no alcohol outside, no alcohol consumption in the parking lot. Change of business model to 21 and up. Hire state licensed private security instead of employees for security purposes as required per the ordinance for the permit 10.3 subsection 4C for both and inside the business. And if they cannot hire an officer, it will ensure that they actually have security on the property. Part of that will need to make sure that there's at least 1 or 2 in the parking lot to keep the fights and stuff from occurring. Security staff assigned specifically to the parking lot in order to keep people from sitting in their vehicles or prompting our property, smoking and drinking. This is the common denominator in reference to several of the most recent incidents which prompted the chief to issue the emergency suspension of the extended hours permit. Regards to the bartenders, we'd like to see some form of training so that they know when to stop serving patrons who obviously already had too many drinks. The current philosophy appears to be drink until you vomit or pass out, as long as you pay to get in and we don't care. Identification scanners, 2 scanners. If there's a question, they need to inquire the law enforcement or reject the customer. Require the use of ID scanners at the business to track who is coming in and out of the business to check for fake IDs. Many of the capabilities of modern technology make it really hard to determine whether they're fake or not, so the machine would assist with that. One of the things was also to re-examine by the fire marshal for occupancy. Also, removal and rejection of customers who present to be overly intoxicated, not dragged out to the sidewalk. They must clear their own property at bar closing. It is not law enforcement's responsibility to remove their customers. The suspension period should be long enough to allow for them to implement the above conditions. These conditions are expected to help alleviate the demonstrated dangers to our citizens and their patrons. Currently, their extended hours permit is suspended, and we'd like to continue that. If you need specific calls, we can go through each call from, I think it's presented from August of last year till now in the packet, and we can go through all the calls and list all the fights and as necessary.
Mr. Delgado, would you like that, or do you feel that's necessary?
Well, I just have a few questions about it, but I think you already have this in your documentation, correct?
I was provided with a set of it, yes.
I just have some general questions. I don't necessarily have questions about each and every one of them. But, I mean, I'm not going to tell the city how to present its case. I mean, I don't think we need to. I have general questions, like I said, about it, but not specific details, so.
Okay.
We have it presented as part of the record, as in terms of whether or not you want to go over each one. We'll leave that to the discretion of the magistrate based on the statements from Mr. Delgado.
Well, we could be here all day going through this, and I suspect that Mr. Delgado may have certain ones that he wishes to focus on from his statements, and maybe it would be easier just to go to those particular instances
Right.
and allow him to question the witness regarding those.
Well, I'd ask before we go there that we, if there's anything else Mr. Blowers intended to present in addition to that, or if not, I did have a couple of questions for him in terms of his direct presentation.
Also, as part of the presentation, these were the bikes the officers were riding when they were in the parking lot when they were struck, and there's apparent damage to them, making them unfunctional.
Okay.
I have an officer here that was struck. If Mr. Delgado would like to ask her any questions, reference the crash in the parking lot by the underage drinker.
Okay, and that officer is whom?
Officer Priest.
Okay.
I also have Detective Lewandowski here, and he's able to speak about the shooting that occurred.
I would be interested in hearing about the shooting.
Well, and it'll be my,
Bring him in, or if
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, it'll be my intent. I'll go ahead and call Officer Priest as well as Officer Lewandowski, so you'll have that opportunity
Okay.
upon the completion of Sergeant Blowers. Okay, so with that being said, is there any other elements of your presentation other than the anticipated going through whatever reports that Mr. Delgado may inquire?
That's about it.
Okay, so I just have a couple of questions regarding what you presented. You spoke of conditions, and Mr. Delgado gave us kind of a little bit of a lead so that we wouldn't have to really go through all of this in terms of understanding certain specific conditions that they seem to have problems with. So I'd like you to speak to them and why they're important from the perspective of the police department. First, that condition number 1, no bags of any kind. What do we mean by that? What does that require? Or what is your thoughts on what it should require?
The point of having
And why we need it?
the point of having no bags allowed in the business is to prevent weapons from being able to be entered. It's easier for them to go through a metal detector and scanned without any bags than them possibly hiding something in the bag that would set off the metal detector but be overlooked by security.
Okay.
Are there any conditions is there any alternatives to all bags versus partial, or what could work? Is there anything less than that?
I believe the police department would be willing to accept having clear bags or like a clutch, so that way it limits what can be brought into. No backpacks, no duffel bags, et cetera.
You mean like the Speedway has done with those clear?
Yes, sir.
So the type of things that you see at some of the larger events, and at the sporting events, things like that, concerts. Okay.
Well, let me ask this. I know that in some courthouses, there are little lockers where because a lot of people tend to walk around with bags, and they're tourists and they're carrying things with them. Is there any possibility that there could be a wall of lockers or something put up where they could put their materials and then go into the establishment?
I mean, that's something that if that's what's necessary, then I'll certainly talk with my clients about it. I mean, our
That's like in federal courthouses.
yeah, right. Well, I mean, I was just in the courthouse today, and I carried my briefcase in. It went through a magnetometer, and that was that. I mean, I think and I talked to Mr. Jackson about this yesterday. I'm not a fashion expert, so I don't want to debate clutches versus valises and purses, and I understand the general intent. And I think that's why having good security is going to make all the difference, and having the prominent signage. I think if people know that they're being checked, if we get into a certain size or maybe, a bag that fits in, like when you're on the airport, they say, your bag has to fit in there. I just don't want to put my clients in a position of having to, just dispute with someone, a guest, that, oh, this is a purse, not a valise, not a clutch or something like that. But, we understand their intent, and certainly our clients want to keep weapons out of there too. We share that desire. So, we'll be willing to work with the police department to, discuss something that's reasonable that doesn't, alienate 50% of our customers.
Ms. Magistrate, what we're looking for is, pursuant to ordinances to alleviate the demonstrated danger. We believe that we have a demonstration of danger when someone is able to bypass. And I know he said they'll work on that with their staff and so forth, and be able to carry a weapon and have instant access to a weapon. Certainly, someone could go out and go to their car, but then that creates that break moment where someone may think about their actions as opposed to this immediate grab. So that's
What
Mr. Delgado.
What I want to do is at the end of this hearing, provided that everyone is agreeable on doing additional conditions, is that we have a very good framework of what those conditions are, an outline, and so that it is known what it is that you are hoping to amend, so that we don't have to repeat all of this in some proceeding at another date, but that your client can go about doing their business, and the city can go about making sure that the public safety issues are addressed.
Thank you, and I do have a couple of the questions for Sergeant Blowers.
Okay.
So as it relates to, and I'm going to skip over a minute over the number 3 and go to number 4, as relates to the private security and issue that Mr. Delgado expressed the importance of that, what we need, what's our circumstance.
Currently, Razzles normally has all their security inside there, and they're not well trained. So when people go through the security metal detectors, they're not checked properly, and weapons are allowed to go in there. They also don't maintain a presence in the parking lot, allowing people to gather, smoke, drink, and other activities, including girls being passed out that are underage in their parking lot. So by having educated security that have been passed by the state, then they would be better trained and more apt to handle the situation.
Is there such a training available from?
Yes, there is a state license for security guards.
Okay.
And then if you can speak to the perspective of the 21 and up, what's the events or circumstances that you believe, how this alleviates the demonstrated dangers?
When you have underage people, teens, 16, 17, 18, because they've been sneaking in with false IDs or whatever, what happens is they're not as mature as older adults, and then something will happen inside the bar, and their egos will cause them to escalate a situation to where it becomes more of a fight and more of a hazard.
If you want to venture on a percentage of this book that we have of incidents or calls for service as relate to underage versus 21 and up, what would you say the percentage of it being under 21?
If I went through each one, it'd probably be close to 30%, at least.
Or under?
And that's only the ones that are documented. I mean, there are other disturbances and fights that occur that we don't complete police reports because when we get there, they start scattering, and those are believed to be underage.
And of course, there are many that appear on social media.
Yes.
I believe on the list as a whole, I think, as Mr. Delgado expressed, we've kind of talked of the other ones. I believe, ultimately would probably be in expressing from his perspective things that they're willing to do, and that's not necessarily of issue. I will, if Mr. Delgado is okay with this. I don't think we presented that proposed list, but.
Sure. And 8's off. 8 struck?
Yeah,
Okay.
eight struck, only because we recognize that they have that authority.
Right, they can do that anyway.
Make that part of this. Madam Clerk. Mr. Richard.
Yes.
That's the list that we, sorry, let me get the mic somewhere. That's the list that Mr. Delgado and I have been kind of working off of, and the one that he's made reference to, as well as the one that Sergeant Blowers has made reference to in terms of things we believe, if they can be implemented, would address and resolve, at least on this immediate circumstance, the alleviating the immediate dangers. Certainly, you know, the promise of the future, if something arises, those powers are there to take whatever actions necessary. But this is where we are today. And so we're speaking as of what we have and what we know of today.
Okay.
Mr. Rizzo, just for the sake of the record and a duplicate copy of the same document I provided to you, I'd like to provide to the secretary. It's duplicate of what we just looked at.
No, it's the same thing we just looked at, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know Mr. Delgado indicated he had inquiries of Mr. Blowers. I have no other questions for Mr. Blowers at this time. I don't know if you want us to present the rest, Sergeant Blowers. I don't know if you want me to present my other witnesses or if you want him to go ahead and do his,
I think it would be best if you present everybody at this time.
certainly.
Do you have anything further, Mr. Sergeant Blowers?
Just go in detail if we need to.
Okay. Now, in this book, I take it that there is a mix of city records and some compilations, like, for instance, 11 pages on the Razzles call history. Did someone prepare that? Is that,
I did.
okay. And from what did you prepare that?
We have a computer-aided dispatch system, and I pulled up the call history for 611 Razzles, and that's what became.
Okay. Looking down through there, I can figure out what some of them are, like fight, and I think MEDEV is a medical evacuation, but there are some other ones like ABAT and DIST, and I have no idea what those are.
ABAT is somebody being hit, struck.
Okay. And that's distinguishable from a fight?
When we do documentation, that's how
Okay.
it gets recorded, and we have to change it to a fight to report to the federal standard. So while some of them will say fight, it might mean that we didn't complete a report because everybody broke up as we were pulling into the area.
Okay. And SINC, what does that,
Yes,
S, like in Sam?
oh,
INC.
suspicious incident. That is when it'll come in and they're not sure exactly what's going on. Someone's acting weird, or they're not sure how to label it, and then we would arrive and go and investigate it.
Okay. All right, Mr. Jackson, do you have anything further with this witness?
No, nothing further with this witness.
Mr. Delgado, do you have any cross-examination?
I do, just some general questions. Thank you. Sergeant, good afternoon, or good morning. How are you?
Good, sir. How you doing?
Good to see you again. Wanted to ask, and I know that you're maybe not the best person to ask some of these questions to, but just as a general rule, would I be correct in assuming that the shooting at Razzles in the parking lot July 22nd, that was one of the triggering events to this why we're here today?
Yes.
Okay. And you'd agree with me that occurred at about 11:48 in the evening?
Yes.
not between the midnight and 2 that this extended hours permit is concerned with.
You're right.
And the alleged shooter was a 29-year-old woman, correct?
The police.
All right. And, I mean, carrying a gun into a bar, if she brought a gun into a bar, that would break state law, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As far as the underage DUI, I also saw the video of that. That person seemed to have walked past like 8 or 9 uniformed police officers in the vehicle, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's my understanding that when they searched the vehicle, they found a bottle of alcohol in the vehicle. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm not positive.
All right. Did they find a fake ID or anything like that to find out how she gained entrance into Razzles?
I am not aware of one being found.
Okay. Did anyone find out how she obtained the alcohol that was in the car?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. As far as, I know I looked at this Razzles call history. I mean, these calls are at all times of the day and night, correct?
Yes, the way I went through and tried to eliminate things that was during the day, but some of these calls that are on here listed during the day is from a fight that occurred the night before, and they're just calling now to report it.
And on some of these where parents called in and reported underage kids drinking, did you ask them how they gained entrance to Razzles?
Did I? No, I did not speak to the parents. This
Okay.
is just based on the call log.
When a call, and I guess that's a fair point. When a call like that comes in, is that going to dispatch and then an officer may respond later? Or how is that working?
It could come in as a THC, which is the telephone handle, or it could come to the front desk and handle different ways.
We don't know, so just in this list of calls, we also don't necessarily know what ages, that's not something the CAD report captures unless it's a specific report of underage drinking, right?
In the full-out CAD call, it would, but most time of the report that I included, or the CAD, if it was juveniles, would be listed in the material that I covered for you, or that's in the file.
And I think you said during your open presentation, fake IDs are getting really good these days.
Yes,
Okay. And about 30% of the calls you estimated were people under the age of 21.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Are you aware, have you been to Razzles in the last, since November of last year?
I was there the night of the crash.
Okay. You agree with me that we do have metal detectors at Razzles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you would agree metal detectors are not going to be 100% of a deterrent all the time?
Correct.
Okay. Is there training with the Daytona Beach, is there training, you mentioned training, you said that getting a state security guard licensure. Do you know how long that training takes or what's involved in that?
I do not remember what the current standard is. I think it was 24 hours last time I knew, but that was a few years ago.
It's my understanding that the City of Daytona Beach Police Department has officers available on special details where the businesses can hire those officers. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Has Razzles, to your knowledge, requested detail officers in the past?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how many detail officers they've requested versus how many detail officers they've been assigned or given?
Officers don't like working the detail because of all the events that occur there, so
Okay.
they don't normally sign up for it.
Okay. And there's a new police substation that's open not too far away from Razzles, correct? Or opening? Is it open
Yes.
yet? Okay. Is there going to be, would that be fair, would the substation there indicate an increased police presence to be expected?
Yes.
Because you would agree that private security, they can't make an arrest, right?
Correct.
And if a private security guard tells me to leave, they can't put their hands on me and forcibly exit me from the property, right?
Correct.
Okay. And if I'm in my car and they tell me, hey, move along, and I tell them, give them some profane response, there's really nothing they can do, right? Except call the police.
Except call us, yes.
Okay. So at the end of the day, and that would be true if you had a state licensed security guard.
Correct.
Nothing about the state licensure gives you like quasi-police powers. You still need a police officer to remove someone, arrest someone, detain someone, right?
If they do not want to leave, yes.
In fact, it's my understanding that actually, if I present a fake ID at a bar, the employee is not even allowed to take that ID from me. Is that correct?
I would have to look it up, sir.
Okay. But certainly they couldn't make an arrest for a fake ID.
They couldn't.
Has the city of Daytona Beach done any kind of fake ID stings or any kind of enhanced enforcement of that, if that's a concern or an issue?
ABT has. I'm not aware if we conducted any recently.
Okay. ABT is the beverage police, essentially?
Yes.
Okay. And when there's been when the police have needed information from Razzles, has Razzles been cooperative about turning over their surveillance footage and cooperating with the police department?
Yes,
And Razzles has pretty extensive video surveillance, right?
yes.
Okay. Do you know approximately how many other establishments on Seabreeze have the same permit to be open or to serve alcohol from midnight to 2? Do you have any idea?
It's around 10, not an exact number though. Don't hold me to it, but it's around 10 other businesses at least.
And if Razzles was not allowed to serve alcohol from midnight to 2 a.m., it's likely that their patrons would just go to one of these other establishments that are within walking distance.
Right? You're asking for speculation, but of course, no formal roots of evidence, just for the record.
Sure.
Yes, and like the night that we invoked the emergency, everybody went down to 509, and there was a line out on the sidewalk. But during that night, there was no fights or calls for intoxicated persons.
So what do we attribute that? Just so happened?
For better security?
What does 509 do that Razzles doesn't acknowledge?
I cannot answer that.
Are there any other bars on the Seabreeze Strip that have this licensure that are restricted to not being able to have patrons under 21 in that time period?
I cannot answer that.
Do you know if any of the other bars on Seabreeze have metal detectors?
509 has the wand.
And the wand probably has more room for operator error than the machine that you walk through, right?
I'm not an expert on it, so
Do any other bars on Seabreeze have the restriction on bags coming in?
currently, no.
And if you know, prior to this emergency order, did anybody from the police department meet with the management or the owners of Razzles to discuss these concerns?
Issues have been discussed with the manager by sergeants on scene and lieutenants, discussing that they have to take care of the parking lot.
Okay. And that's what you were saying, that at closing time, essentially, they just close down and then people spill out into the parking lot and they're not really doing anything in the parking lot. That's what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. What could they do differently, or what would you ask them to do differently at that closing time? What should they be doing differently that they're not doing now?
If they had security stationed in the parking lot, trying to drive people, tell them, hey, you can't hang out here, you gotta leave the parking lot, you're gonna be arrested by police. It would drive them to leave, and if they are refusing, then they can call us and we can remove them.
Do any of these calls for service concern weapons being smuggled into Razzles?
There was another weapons complaint listed in this. I cannot testify whether or not anything was smuggled into the Razzles. I don't remember how long they've had their metal detectors.
I think it was November of last year. Let's say that we had security in the parking lot, ushering people along and kind of urging them. That would help the situation, right?
Yes, should help alleviate some of the fights.
And if my clients get a device that scans the driver's license that's connected to like a national database to make sure that it's a real ID and the person's really under 21, that should help the situation, right?
Yes,
And if they have more thorough searches of bags, maybe having people take their hands off, put the bag down, or up in the bag, or things like that, that would improve security, right?
yes.
Okay. One moment. I don't have any further questions. Thank you very much, Sergeant.
Any redirect, Mr. Jackson?
Yes, Sean, if you can hold on. You were asked if the, well, it's actually argument, so, but you were asked with the extended hour permit that whether or not the incident, the shooting incident occurred during the extended hour.
Correct.
And as part of that question was that what the, is not what the ordinance is concerned with? Article 11 of the ordinance, isn't that a emergency ordinance for issues of danger?
Yes.
And so would that necessarily require, or would you even be only considering after hours, or you'd be considering the danger to the public?
I would consider anything that's endangering the public.
So a demonstrated danger. And do you feel that a person bringing a firearm in, smuggle it into a active dance hall with a bunch of even underage and adults creates a danger to the public, especially if they result in shooting?
I do.
And were there shootings that were done on that night?
Yes.
And people were injured from those shootings?
Yes.
Okay. On you were asked about the arrest concerning the vehicle, the driving of the underage girl. And would it be correct to say that I think she was 17, that's probably more correct, and the passenger was 16?
I remember about 16, 17.
But
I'm not exactly.
both of them were underage, certainly. In fact,
The officer should be able to testify to that.
even underage for entry, not only underage for drinking, but underage for entry, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and was there, you said there was a hand stamp, right? Or was there proof of them being in the,
Yes, I believe there was a hand stamp on it. And again, the officer that was on scene would be able to testify to that.
okay, and, okay. And then, regarding detail officers, is that voluntary or compulsory?
Voluntary.
Okay, in fact, if they don't go, they don't go, and it's nothing that you know of that can be done other than them having to do some alternative.
Yeah, we would have to sign up for the details, and if nobody signs up for it, then they would be left unfilled, and it would be up to the business to provide the security for during that time.
And you've received reports that's just too difficult to detail when there's other options?
Yes.
Okay. We hope that would change. And you were asked about whether or not security could put hands on in terms of removing people from the business.
We don't recommend going to hands-on, because obviously there can be a fight, but if there's an active fight, obviously they can help assist to break it up.
Okay, but don't you have, and we can present it if necessary, but do you have video or photos of them going hands-on and putting persons out of the business?
They have carried people out of the business.
Okay. Okay. And what you're reporting today is based upon the records from the police department, the electronic records that's part of the regular, being held in the regular course of business of the city.
Yes.
And your view of Razzle's own surveillance videos.
Yes.
Okay. As well as the view of the axons from the officers.
Yes.
Oh, I don't have any other questions.
Nothing further? Mr. Sergeant Blowers, I just have a question for you. Assume someone is so inebriated that they can't stand up and they're being carried out. Where can they go? Is it you call a hospital, or I don't know. What do you do with somebody in that situation?
The ideal situation is to prevent it from getting to that
I understand
part.
that.
But when it does happen, if they're on the floor or whatever, if they didn't see them fall or not, risking moving them if they hit their head could cause more injury to them. So we would then send fire rescue into the business to remove them, so that way if they did fall and hit their head, there wasn't any continued injury. If when they're made contact, say they're conscious or unconscious, if they're able to walk, they can be Marchman Act, which we would transport ourselves, but most time they can't walk, so they would be Marchman Act and transported by evac or the fire department. Well, evac.
Okay. and I suspect this may relate to the bartenders. Will they be able to detect when somebody is getting to a point where they are, or in your experience?
I believe if they have a little more training, they should be able to definitely recognize it. But I mean, for the most part, you should be able to recognize when somebody should be cut off.
Okay. I'm just looking at it's easier to prevent a problem than to deal with it. Okay. I have nothing further.
I don't have any questions. I don't have anything further for Sergeant Blauer.
Mr. yeah.
No, we'll give you some evidence about how the bar works. So yeah, we're good. We don't have any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Sergeant.
Yeah, I got you.
Mr. Jackson, do you have any other?
Yes, Your Honor, the city will call Lieutenant Gernert.
Could you state your name for the record?
Lieutenant Kimberly Gernert.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, and Lieutenant Gernert, if I may proceed. You ready for me to proceed, Mr. Magistrate?
Excuse me? Proceed.
Yes, okay. Lieutenant Gernert, Lieutenant with the Daytona Beach Police Department. And were you out on any of these incidents that you would like to speak to?
Yes, I was the shift lieutenant on the night of the shooting. That particular night, the call never came into police department. An officer from a nearby bar working detail there was flagged down and told that this subject was out in the parking lot fighting when the shots were fired. Brazzles did provide the video for us in reference to it. However, as it was determined, the subject involved in the case actually had been in Razzles prior to. She brought in a very large handbag, somehow was able to open the bag for security, sort of hiding the gun is my understanding. She was in the club for however long, came out, and then the fight broke out in the parking lot. The gun that was used in that particular case was a full-size 9mm gun, bright pink in color. So that was part of that incident. I was also the shift lieutenant the night that the incident occurred where the officers were hit by a car. Video reveals that the driver, who was 17 years old, had a stamp on her hand for under 21 to get into the club. She utilized her own normal identification card where her birth year was 2006. Her friend, who was 16 years old and the passenger in the car, showed security her identification card from a photograph on her cell phone. I don't know what that showed, which is how they were able to get into the club. They went into the club for a while. I don't know what the video shows as to whether or not they purchased alcohol, but the 16-year-old was stamped as a 21 and up by the security guard. And that's the one who showed their photo ID through the cell phone instead. The girls entered their car. Don't know why they decided to back out at the time they did. They backed up, ran over law enforcement bicycles, struck at least 2 officers, injuring one. It's minor injuries, a bruise, but did injure one officer, and then pulled the car forward, running over a pedestrian, and then striking a second one who did not want to go to the hospital. The driver, who's 17, she went to jail for DUI, possession of alcohol under 21 and a curfew violation, and the passenger went to jail for possession of alcohol under 21 and a curfew violation.
Tell us the whole story.
There you go.
I don't have any other questions.
If I just have a question, Mr. Delgado, if I may.
Please.
You said a curfew violation.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
explain it? What's a curfew?
Wait, the city ordinance is a violation of curfew by anybody under the age of 18 who is not going, after midnight, who is not coming from or going to a job. a medical emergency, anything of that nature, and these two girls were not coming from or going to a job. They did not have a medical emergency, and they, in fact, had been in a nightclub.
Okay.
I do have a question, a little bit related, if I may. We're hesitant to show the video unless the magistrate wants us to, mainly because we talk about a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old. However, having seen them, was there anything significant about them in terms of size or anything like that that would make someone believe they were older in age?
Older in age? No. They're small. They're females, so they were tiny, but
In fact,
they were
petite.
certainly young. I would question them.
Okay.
I would certainly question them.
Especially a 16 for 21?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I do question both of them about whether or not they were even 18 to even get in the club.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been the shift lieutenant on that district for nearly 4 years. I've worked for this agency for almost 21 years, and all that time I've worked the bar districts a majority of my career. There are times when you have fighting where people don't contact the police. The next day they end up with a brain bleed. They end up with serious injuries to include bone breaks. They fall and hit their head with the amount of alcohol of consumption that they've had. It's not solely directed at one particular business all the time, but it seems to come from one particular business as of late. Security measures are not the greatest, and we constantly have to remind security to remove their own customers from their business property itself, because it's not our responsibility to do that. They have to have, we're not their business agent. So even if they don't have a detail, it's still not our responsibility to clean their own property off of their own customers.
These conditions that were suggested, they were well-thought conditions on how these dangers can be alleviated or remedied?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Delgado?
Sure. Lieutenant, good morning. How are you? The DUI arrest of the two young women, there was alcohol found in the vehicle, right?
Yes, 2 bottles of Jack Daniels that were better than half empty.
Okay. So we don't know that they were necessarily served alcohol inside the establishment?
I can't say if they were served or not. They more than likely drank in the parking lot,
Okay.
but their car was parked in the parking lot.
Okay. And so the one girl had been stamped as under 21?
Correct?
Okay. Are there some states that let you show photo ID on a phone or something? Is that, I know like for insurance cars and stuff now.
Insurance card's one thing. Photo ID, you can't prove it's legitimate or not. So I don't know of any state that allows you to show an ID that way.
Okay. So likely the 16-year-old maybe had an altered or doctored ID is what we're thinking?
I would assume.
Okay.
She wouldn't show us her phone. She wouldn't show us how she got into the club. The surveillance shows how she entered the business.
Okay. But we don't necessarily, as you said, they may have been drinking in the parking lot. And I guess your personal perception was they appeared to be clearly not 21, or they could be young-looking people. I mean, that's the whole purpose for the identification, right? I mean, because people look young or old, regardless.
There's a couple factors there. I mean, these 2 girls walked in and they don't even appear to be 18 in my opinion. I would question them if I was an employee. At that point, the security guard, whoever that person is at the front door, should have rejected them immediately if they could not prove they were 18 to get into the business. Ultimately, the business is responsible for allowing that customer to come in and whatever occurs afterwards. So, the one girl presents her ID as her own ID with the year of 2006, which doesn't even put her close to being 18. Makes her 17. Her month of her birth was March.
And that's based on what she told you how she got in?
No, that's on the video.
Okay, that's on video, her showing the ID?
Correct.
Okay, and we can see on the video that that's not a fake ID or something? You can see it?
No, I can't tell you that because you can't see that.
Right, I guess that's what I was trying to ascertain. So she showed an ID. Did she explain to officers that how she got in, or that's just what we're assuming by watching the video?
The officers told me that when they questioned her post-Miranda, of course, that's how she got in. We showed her ID.
Okay. But certainly that young lady broke several laws that evening.
Yes.
Okay. Not the least of which was DUI with damage, well, property damage and personal injury, right? Okay. In your time working on the, I guess, the entertainment district, or what we're going to call it, I mean, obviously, fake ID is a common problem.
It happens.
Okay. And to your knowledge, there periodically, especially during like spring break, you'll get other agencies that'll run operations for fake ID.
Alcohol, beverage, and tobacco does come in and do that. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting with them not too long ago. They actually went into the business and did the same operation. Our agency has done them, to include my own shift, has done them in the past.
You say they went
Sometimes
into the
they're free.
business, you mean Razzles?
Brazzles, 509, we've done them both,
And to your knowledge, the businesses, like, they cooperate with that, right?
certainly.
And you said Razzles did provide the video. Have you worked with Razzles on other criminal investigations where are they generally cooperative and provide the video?
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, their security cameras is kind of what helps make the case in the shooting, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And that woman that brought the gun in, she broke several laws, as I've asked the other officers. It's illegal to bring a gun into a bar, things like that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess it's only because of Razzles cameras that you know that she didn't go to a car and retrieve it or anything like that. Like she's on camera the entire time.
Correct. There's other cameras in the general area that also support that, but yes.
Okay. And a couple officers have, not a couple, you and Sergeant Blauer have talked about the difficulty at closing time. And I guess you're saying that the staff from Razzles isn't kind of getting people in their cars and ushering them out. You'd agree that they don't have the same authority as a police officer to order people to leave and things like that, right?
They're the agents of the business, so if people don't comply with the request from an employee from the business, then they can contact us, because there's plenty of us in the area, to ask people to get off the property who won't leave. At that point, we can arrest them under their request for trespassing.
Sure. So they still
you know,
need that extra step of getting you involved.
They do need that extra step if that comes to that point. But when you don't even apply it to begin with, then it becomes a problem. So there's people lingering, fighting occurs, more drinking, more narcotic use, anything of that nature will occur. And then when we have to dedicate resources to that one particular area, we're not able to deal with other areas within the general bar district. So we get fights in other areas, but it seems to be more like there's fighting at this particular area than in other areas. Some of the businesses in the area, like 509, they have a gate around their whole property. When their security goes and clears out their property, they clear them off the property completely and then close the gates and nobody can return. Their security seems to be more active in removing people who are highly intoxicated, acting inappropriately. They put their hands on them and they put them out of business. That's what their job is. That's what they're paid to do. Razzles Security does do those things sometimes, but as of late, it's not been happening. So we end up having to get involved a little more than we should be.
Is there any, I mean, are you understaffed in law enforcement capacity to patrol the Seabreeze area?
With overtime, we're able to do it.
Okay. And as far as the request for patrol, duty officers, you said that, in fact, the shooting was reported by that a detail officer from another establishment was the one that was flagged down.
Correct.
They kind of, and then the shots came as he was, or she was responding, right?
Correct.
All right. What agents, what business were they a detail for, do you know?
Grandview Live.
Okay. And Grandview Live kind of shares the block with Razzles, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are there other establishments on Seabreeze that have detail officers all the time, or is it just they fill in if they can?
Like Sergeant Blowers testified, officers do this on a voluntary basis. I mean, the ordinance changed a while back where it's an increased fee to pay people to work at a bar, so $60 an hour. Working at, like, the other places that hire a detail is Club 509 and at Grandview Live. Razzles is the third one who hires a detail. Officers don't really care to work the Razzles detail because of the young people who are in there causing a problem, whether they're under 18 or not. They cause a lot of problems. There's a lot of fighting, and they risk injury or complaint. That's not necessary
A complaint against the police
against
officer.
the officer
Okay.
for not either doing something or doing something they didn't like it. There's a variety of reasons why they don't want to work it. Whereas other businesses like Grandview Live, their security actually does a lot before they involve the officers. And the same thing with 509. Their security officers engage in the crowd and with the customers before they have to involve law enforcement. So they prefer to work those details over the Razzles one.
Do you know how many security people are at 509 on a given night?
No, I don't. I couldn't answer the question.
All right. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, I just have, in response to
Jackson.
those, yes. Don't think I lost it here. Oh, you had mentioned that the fighting, apparently that's something that's been a routine thing?
Yes.
Always reported, or?
Not always reported. There are times when law enforcement's in the area for bar closing and fights break out, and it's a huge crowd, and by the time we get to the source of that crowd, whoever was fighting, they've disappeared into the crowd, and we can't make that arrest. There are times when the two people who are fighting get caught, and they don't want to prosecute each other. Otherwise, at that point, now we just have a city ordinance violation of disorderly conduct. There are times when the officers choose not to make that arrest. A lot of times it doesn't go documented. Doesn't mean we aren't there and that it doesn't happen. There's times when there's fights and we can't get to it yet. There's so many times that we've done that where a fight is called in, a fight occurs, and the law enforcement isn't called, but we can't get there because we're dealing with something else within the general area.
Do you agree that us being here today isn't about who's good or who's bad, but about alleviating the dangerous, the clear dangers that we have to resolve pursuant to the ordinance?
Absolutely.
The demonstrated
This
dangers
isn't-
is what I'm looking for.
Yes, this isn't specific to one business. It seems that way, but it's not specific to one business. But over the last month or two, we've had way more violent crimes at one particular location than we have all over that general bar district. Prior, we had another business down the street that had a lot of crimes occurring in that area because of the business, but that business is gone and the crime is gone. There's another local bar right down the street that had a shooting in their parking lot, but it wasn't at somebody. They fired the gun into the ground. But their security was there. They handled it, and they called us just because the gun got fired. We're not looking for termination of their business in general. We want them to comply and make their business safer for not only their customers, but for law enforcement as well. That's all we're looking for.
And the citizens of Daytona
Citizens,
Beach.
of course,
Certainly, and tourists and so forth.
of course.
Absolutely.
Anybody who wants to go down there.
I don't have any other questions.
I have a few follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
What was the business that you said that is gone now? What was that business?
Hookah Pub,
Okay.
502 Seabreeze.
And weren't they, was that kind of like they were like kind of serving alcohol maybe without licenses and things like that? There's a lot of issues with that place,
I
right?
don't think they were serving alcohol without a license. They're a tobacco dealer, and they had a tobacco license, but they didn't fall under the ordinance for an after-hours permit requirement until April. When April occurred, the business closed because they didn't get their after-hours permit, so that business is gone.
Okay. So the inability to be open shut them down.
Absolutely, and then the violence ended.
Is the police presence in that area like constant throughout the evening, or is it really more of a surge towards the closing hour, like 2 to 3 in the morning?
There are officers assigned to the area and throughout the night, and then we have to quadruple the number of officers to attend to the thousands of people that end up there so that they're safe.
And that's in the 2 to 3 a.m. kind
It's
of
like
period?
1:30 to 2:30, 3-ish.
Okay. I think they recently rolled back the time, right, from
They
3
did.
o'clock?
Yes.
So it's essentially when the bar is closing, that's when you need the most
Correct.
response, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes, I have to, as a shift lieutenant, I have to take my resources from other areas of my district to concentrate there because of the number of people there so that the safety is present.
And not to malign my street, but there have been other shootings on Seabreeze in the last couple of years. There was a shooting, right? There was a shooting in the Wells Fargo parking lot. There was a shooting that started outside Frank's, what Frank's Front Row used to be. They chased the person down the road, and they were actually shot outside kind of like the Oyster Pub area. right?
Yes.
There's been a
Well, it
couple-
wasn't that far down. It was further, more like near Wild Olive, but yeah, there was a
Okay.
shooting in that area.
So, I mean,
But
there
that
have
was
been-
also while that other business was open.
Right, but I think the fight started in like the tap room or something, right? It led to that shooting?
Yes.
And then they kind of chased them down the Seabreeze.
Yes.
Well, shots were fired when they kind of turned that corner. So, I mean, there have been shootings on Seabreeze unrelated to
Yeah.
this, right? And generally, I think, are shootings up in the city?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I don't have any more questions.
And just one question on that, and the response to the shootings referenced by Delgado, the agency felt was adequate and appropriate response.
Absolutely.
And we did have some concern about just how to eliminate what happened this time.
Yes. Public safety is obviously first. Our safety is first. So whatever we can do to alleviate the problem.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Nothing for,
Mr. Jackson, you're dismissed.
Yes, I will call Officer Priest.
Is it gonna bother if I move the bicycle exhibit?
No problem.
Could you state your name, please?
Officer Isabella Price.
Oh, probably sorry with that.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Officer with the Daytona Beach Police Department,
Yes, sir.
and you were an officer on the night of this bicycle incident that we referenced,
Yes, sir.
which would have been, what is that, last Friday, past
I
Friday
believe
night?
so. Yeah, it was a Friday night.
Yeah, I believe August 4th, August 3rd, somewhere around, but that last Friday.
Yes, sir.
And you were on scene, were you a bicycle officer at that time, or were you on foot?
I was a bicycle officer that night.
Okay, is that routine that we have bicycle officers in that area during those,
Usually on Fridays and Saturdays. Yes, sir.
okay. And tell us what you'd like to tell us about that event.
We were dispatched to a disturbance. An officer was already on scene, so I went over there to back him up. When I arrived on scene, we were kind of dealing with the disturbance. A vehicle wanted to leave. Our bicycles were parked where that vehicle wanted to leave was, so I grabbed the two bicycles. As I was moving the two bicycles over in front of the vehicle that hit myself, I moved the bike and I took one step backwards. And as I took the one step backwards, I noticed the vehicle reversing.
Okay, and was there any question who was in it? I think ultimately y'all had to go to the window and say, open up, and you knew who was driving.
That is correct. It was a 17-year-old driving that we later determined she was 17 after questioning her and getting her ID. And then we realized there was a 16-year-old passenger.
Okay, and I think it probably was pointed out before that open alcohol was found in the vehicle.
That is correct. We found two bottles of Jack Daniels, to be exact.
Okay, and they ultimately did field sobriety tests.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and in addition to that, it was presumptively, what was your perspective of, were you involved in the DUI arrest itself?
I witnessed her doing the field sobriety test. I did not issue them. I was kind of just standing by, just waiting to go back to the police department. But it clearly showed that she failed. I only paid attention to the 9-step heel to toe. She couldn't do heel to toe at all, but other than that, I don't know how she drew or anything, if she did blow or anything.
Okay. And we're not here to try and prove the DUI, any of that stuff. That's for another day, another court. But from the perspective of what you saw in her, was it observable to you of her instability that would at least have you question whether she was intoxicated?
You could definitely tell she was intoxicated. Not even a question that she was intoxicated.
Okay. And a business wouldn't and shouldn't be allowing someone in that's already intoxicated into a bar. to get further intoxicated. Wouldn't you agree with that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So regardless of where she got intoxicated, it was problematic that she was intoxicated and ended up driving, and she was in the parking lot. And she did have a stamp from
That is correct.
Razzles. Okay.
And she admitted being inside Razzles.
I'm sorry?
She admitted being inside Razzles. She told us she was inside Razzles.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
She was stamped under 21, though, right?
I believe so, yes.
All right. And the Jack Daniels, I mean, we don't know that she was served alcohol inside Razzles, do we?
That is correct.
She may have been drinking in the parking lot at any point that night or anywhere else with the liquor that was found in the vehicle, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and can we get the date that this happened? Because I think that this complaint was served on August 10th. What date did this, was it, you said it was last Friday going into Saturday, or do you remember the date that this incident occurred?
It was Friday night going into Saturday morning.
Okay. I think that's the 11th going into the 12th, right?
Calendar, sir?
Okay.
If you punch it in, I'll agree with it if that's what
Well,
it is.
I think we can agree it's Fridays, last Friday was the 11th and last Saturday was the 12th?
Yes, that is correct.
So it happened Saturday morning, like Friday turning into Saturday when the
Yeah,
incident?
so I work 6 to 6, so it'd be Friday, yeah, Saturday when the bars are
Right,
closing.
Saturday morning when bars were closing?
Yes.
Okay. So after April 10th? After August, of course, after April 10th, but also after August 10th?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
I have a question, and that is, this was in the parking lot for Razzles? The car was parked there?
Yes, sir.
Is there anyone patrolling the parking lot to make sure that people are not drinking in the parking lot and then going into Razzles?
Security should be monitoring their parking lot, but I mean, police officers do try to make it our ways in the parking lots as calls for service and other things happen.
Okay, I just mean that generally for people who are drinking, the alcohol is cheaper if they buy it in a bottle and drink it in the car and then go into the establishment. And I'm just wondering if you had witnessed anyone there who was trying to prevent people from loitering in the parking lot or drinking in the cars prior to going into the establishment? No. Okay.
Called that being frugal in college.
I agree.
However, you would acknowledge that there is a prohibition for drinking in the parking lot as part of the after-hours permit?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other
And if
questions.
there's anything further?
No, nothing further of this officer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Isabella. Price, Preiss.
And Mr. Jackson, I just have kind of procedural matter. If this event occurred after the effective date of the notice, if the notice of suspension was served on the 10th, how can we consider an event that occurred after the 10th as being a justification for the notice?
The notice was served after the event.
The letter is dated August 10th.
Yeah, the notice of suspension says August 10th. If this occurred on the 11th, how can we use this to establish the burden that you have for the emergency suspension if it occurred after I just don't understand how that would be fair.
I will recall Mr. Bowers. I will believe his testimony would be that it was served on the 11th, and it's a date error. Sergeant Bowers.
What I'm saying is it's not one of the, like even in that letter, whether it was served later or not, the letter is dated the 10th, and it's not one of the listed grounds in there. It's the shooting, 13 fights, the complaints from parents, and then the calls for service. So, I mean, I certainly understand you can, if you want to talk about it, but I don't know how it can be part of the magistrate's findings when we're not noticed of it, it's not in the complaint, and it occurred after the date of the notice. So I just want to make that kind of formal objection to considering it as evidence in this because of the date that it occurred and that we weren't on notice that this is not formally one of the grounds the city was establishing. So I don't know if they're allowed to amend it. I would think that they can't amend it without, resetting the hearing or something like that. So I do think I have to make that point.
And
Understood.
I'm sorry.
Understood.
I'm sorry.
I understand his objection.
Yeah, and I was about to say, I didn't understand you initially, but I do understand your objection as well. And I would just like to say that the obligation of alleviating demonstrated dangers would arise and continue even after we've served. And so here we served you, and a danger occurred immediately following that service. And I understand your point, though, and I'm not challenging that other than to say that it is additional evidence that we would ask the magistrate to consider of continued dangers that are arising. And I don't need Sergeant Blowers because I didn't understand
All right,
the
I'm sorry, maybe I
objection
wasn't clear
initially.
enough, but that's
Yeah.
my concern. All right.
Do you have
Oh.
any more witnesses?
I'm up on it. Yes, I would call Detective Lewandowski.
Could you state your full name for the record?
Brian Lewandowski.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Detective Lewandowski, officer with the detective with the Daytona Beach Police Department.
Yes, sir.
And I believe it's been said that you were an investigating officer regarding the shooting that we've been discussing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did you determine through your investigation? What happened, and what can you tell us?
Through video of the night, we have video from the subject walking into the business from where she parked her car. Walking out of the business, she's out of video range for, my guess would be between 30 and 45 seconds. A fight occurs, and then she pulls out a firearm from her purse and fires several rounds.
Was there anything that told you whether a firearm was already in her possession, or was there anything that told you that it may have been missed, or what did you get that determination from?
The 30 or 45 seconds that she was off camera, she was in the back parking lot of the Razzles parking lot, and I can say that her car was not parked there or anywhere near there. She was parked down the street, so it's pretty evident that it was in her purse the entire time.
And in fact, did you have an opportunity to view surveillance as to her entry into the business?
Yes.
And was there anything that would have left you with concern from what you observed then?
The metal detector did go off when she went in, but as of today, when I watched the video again, the metal detector went off for every single person that walked in,
So
which is a concern.
that was a concern. And did you observe any subsequent search, or how did that, what
I
was
did
the
not,
level of
no.
that? Okay. And there's something else you think we ought to know about this? I don't have any other questions. Do you have anything further?
No?
Okay, I don't have any questions.
Detective, how are you?
Good, how about yourself?
Good. So the video doesn't show any security guards opening the bag or her opening the bag or anything like that? For the
Not that
security?
I recall.
Okay. And you just, okay. Did it show them searching any people or any bags in the video?
Not that I recall.
Okay. All right, but we have that video somewhere, right?
That would be Sergeant Blowers if he.
Well, I mean, so the Daytona Beach Police Department has that video.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah, I didn't know if you want us to present it.
No, and you got that video from Razzles, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And was Razzles cooperative in furnishing you all the video?
Absolutely.
Okay. And have you had occasion to investigate other crimes that occurred in that area and get footage from Razzles?
Yes,
Were they generally cooperative with you?
absolutely.
And fair to say, the best evidence you have in this case, well, not the best, a lot of the evidence you have in this case comes from Razzles surveillance, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And it's against the law to bring a gun into a bar?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously, this person, I mean, intentionally fired these shots and all that, right? I mean, that's your contention, attempted murder?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions.
I just have a couple in response to Attorney Delgado. Is it your understanding that the after-hours permit requires businesses that have obtained that permit to be cooperative with law enforcement?
Yes.
Is your understanding that the after-hours permit requires them to provide surveillance video and have surveillance?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Detective, I have a question for you. You stated that you observed the video and that all of the bags that were being opened triggered the, whatever it is, the buzzer or the alarm.
No, sir, what I noticed when I watched the video is that every single person, whether they had a bag or not, that walked through the metal detector, it appeared that it went off.
Okay.
I don't know a lot about their metal detectors, but it might be a sensor saying they're walking in or out. That I don't know the answer to, as far as if it goes off for everybody that walks in as like an alarm, or if it goes off only if it detects metal, or, you know, I don't know their system.
Would you agree it appeared to have been ineffective for that night?
I'm sorry.
I said, would you agree it appeared to be ineffective for
Yes.
that night? Okay. I don't have any other questions, of Detective Lewandowski.
Okay.
Nothing from us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Spell your full name, please. D-R-I-A-N. And last name is L-E-W-A-N-D-O-W. That's correct.
And that's everything that the city is presenting. Again, would be willing to, if you desire to see the video, it's been well described, each video. The caution on the one with the two youth that have been arrested, I'm just a little cautious on that. If anything, we'd want to show you probably in camera away from the general production for the sake of these minors.
I have the testimony, and I think that what was stated in the testimony hits the relevant factors, as opposed to getting into issues of minors who may be on tape.
And if there's no objection from Mr. Regarding that issue from Mr. Delgado, we have nothing else to present. We're
Yeah, I mean, my concern is, as I stated earlier, that I don't think the DUI incident is part of what we were noticed about. I don't object if you later determine that you need to review that video. You can review it in camera. I don't have an issue with that.
Okay.
We would like to call one witness.
Sure.
I'll have him. Your Honor, we call Kyriakis Dramonis, and we'll have him spell his name.
Kyriakos.
Could you slow down so I can get it?
I'm sorry. Kyriakos. Last name Drymonis. Kyriakis Dramonis.
Raise your hand, please.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Sir, can you kind of state your name and tell us what you do for a living?
Kyriakis Dramonis. My family owns and operates businesses on Seabreeze Boulevard, known as Razzles Nightclub and the Oyster Pub. We also own property interests in that area.
And how long has your family been operating Razzles in one form or another?
Razzles since 1985.
Okay. And you live in Volusia County?
Yes, I do.
And are you and your brother's also involved in the business?
He is.
Are you and your brother commonly at the restaurant or at the nightclub in the area that you own?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And just kind of to set the stage for us, inside what's the occupancy roughly of the Razzles nightclub? How many people are you allowed to have in it roughly?
Razzles Nightclub has an occupancy of 900.
Okay. And when you go inside, there's one main entrance?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the only entrance that customers would be allowed to go through?
Yes.
And then you have, when did you put in metal detectors?
The metal detectors were added the weekend before Thanksgiving of 2022, so not even a year yet.
Okay. And then those are positioned in the front where people have to go through to gain entry?
Correct. We bought 3 of them.
Okay.
And the reason for that is sometimes we use 2 lines for entrance. That mostly happens during the special event time of year.
Okay.
Most of the time, it's simply 1 line of people going in. And then the third one acts as re-entry. So if someone leaves the premises, we do allow re-entry with a stamp. So to re-enter the premises, you would go through the re-entry line.
Okay. And when I come to enter into this establishment, I show my ID before I go through the metal detector? Or
No,
after?
you show your ID after.
Okay. And then,
The steps are you walk through the metal detector. If it does not buzz, you go and get your ID checked, and then you can enter the establishment. If the metal detector does buzz, you are then given a secondary search with a wand. And both devices are made by the company Garrett. So you are wanded then at that point. Usually males that set off the detector, we make them empty their pockets, and then we wand in the waist area. The detector will tell you it has a bar on each side.
Tell you
and
where the metal
Tell
is.
you where to check.
okay.
So if it's in the waist area, that's what we do for males. Generally, women are wearing dresses and things like that, so you can kind of tell that there's not a weapon of any kind there. But
Similar to security, we have like a courthouse here in Volusia County, things like that?
yeah.
And then if they have a bag or a purse or something, and is that searched as well or looked through?
So when the females walk through, we don't divest anybody prior to them coming through the metal detector. If the metal detector goes off, then they are searched,
Okay.
including the purse.
Now, are there surveillance cameras that capture the interaction of the customers with the metal detectors?
Yes, there are.
And how many are there?
There's several angles. There's probably 4 angles that you can see.
Have you personally reviewed the surveillance footage of the alleged shooter entering into your establishment?
Yes, I have.
And does that show, what does that show?
It shows her walking through the metal detector, and the metal detector does go off. Now, I know one officer mentioned it was going off for all of them. One side of the metal detector does turn red every time. That's the one that tells you to walk through, and as you walk through, it stops and turns green again. The other side is the side that alerts you. It's not the side facing the street, so I don't know which view he may have watched, but the metal detectors are working. And so when she walks through the metal detector, it sets it off. And then our security guy was checking the one lady's purse prior to her, checked it, and you can see her at that time take her hand, and it appears there was, again, I'm not a purse expert either, but a divider within the purse that she pushed against the side of the purse and opened the remainder of the purse like that. And it appears that it was missed.
Okay. As far as then at that point, they are then subjected to, they're asked to present their ID.
Correct.
Does everybody, my grandmother, does she show her ID when she goes in? Or is it,
Generally, if it's a grandmother, no, but
My grandmother
with our
should be.
with our demographic, with our demographic, we do ask everybody to present ID.
okay.
Yes.
And then, kind of to jump ahead, have you recently made arrangements to do something different with the ID checking and compliance to make, I guess fake IDs are a big problem, right?
Yes, they are. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of websites these days that will send you an ID. They are mostly offshore based. They accept alternative forms of payment, such as Bitcoin and PayPal and things like that, that make it less easy to track.
So it's not just finding an older sibling who kind of looks like you and memorizing their date of birth.
Historically, that's what was being done. More so now, what we're seeing is the ordering of these. They are called novelty IDs because they are not real IDs, but that's what we.
Are you allowed to confiscate, if I present a novelty ID, are you allowed to confiscate it from me?
We cannot, because in addition to them being novelty, if they look so real, we don't know if they're actually real IDs. So we cannot be misappropriating people's real property if it is in fact their property. So licensees in Florida are not permitted to do that.
Okay. Alcohol licenses.
Correct. That's by the Division of Alcohol.
Okay. So you would be violating the licensure conditions if you confiscated a suspicious ID.
Yeah, I don't know if they would. If
They would do
I would
anything.
think they wouldn't do anything about that. But yeah.
You could certainly get sued or something could happen.
Yeah, I mean, it just could create an altercation that doesn't need to happen.
Okay. So what will be happening differently effective, I believe, yesterday or today? What did you guys do with regards to IDs to make things different or better?
Well, with regards to the IDs, we've, on Saturday morning, even prior to us being notified of this suspension,
And yeah, we'll get to the timing of that, but yeah, just.
Yeah, on Saturday morning after we witnessed this event and we found out that this was a minor, we sent an email to this company known as IntelliCheck. I've learned of this company through the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco. The ABT uses it. When they come in and they do their sting operations, they use this technology. It wasn't available to retail establishments at first. I think it was strictly law enforcement. It has become available now to retail establishments. And
It's not cheap, though.
it's, quite frankly, it's outrageously expensive, but it seems to be one of the more successful ones, and the fact that the ABT is using it seems to be why we are going to go ahead and use it as well. I want to back up just for a second because about 4 years ago, we tried a different ID scanner technology. And what we learned when we compared it with ABT's technology is ours was letting IDs through while the ABT one was catching. So there's obviously some different proprietary information that they had there. And some of the ones on the market still don't do the type of job that this particular software does.
This runs on like a cell phone-based app.
It's a cell phone-based app. It's very simple. You scan the results, you scan the back of the ID, and the results come back to you within 1 or 2 seconds.
So in addition to knowing their age, you're also going to know or you should know who's in the establishment.
You'll be able to have a record of who was in the establishment that evening and what ID they actually presented and if it got through.
And what time they came to the establishment,
Yeah,
et cetera.
yeah.
All that kind of information will be
Yeah.
available now.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if you're allowed to reopen, you're ready to implement this new measure already?
Yeah, it's ready. We went ahead and did the application on Monday, spoke to them. We tried to negotiate a little bit better deal, which we did. I will note that they just ran a 6-month program in the city of Charleston, South Carolina with this technology. They ran it from December to June, so it literally just ended a month ago, where the city of Charleston, Carolina paid for 30 of their businesses on King Street to do this technology. 100,000 IDs throughout the course of 6 months and 3,400 fake IDs during that time. Yeah, so about 3.4% were presented out of all those 100,000. And then you got to figure there was probably some deterrence as well once people heard that this technology was in place and was able to
And
detect IDs.
it's your intent to display signage as to the fake ID issue and the new security measures, correct?
Yes, of course. Not having a 17-year-old is not what we want in our business. So that stuff is going to go in place.
So we've talked about the ID thing, and then once we go, so then at that point, we've now gained entry into the Razzles establishment. Now,
Well, when you mentioned, you also mentioned the bag check. What have we done differently there? We've employed a more intrusive form of search, and what we are probably going to do is actually put a divesting table out there, is what we discussed, so that someone cannot no longer manipulate their item
right.
to make it look like they don't have anything in it. So the person would put it on a purse, on a table, and then our security would search it. So.
And I guess just kind of while we're kind of chronologically on this, as far as bags, one of the city's requests or concerns is that either no bags or, restricted bags to a certain size or thing like that. Would you say, a large number of your guests are coming in with bags of difference?
A large number of our guests are females, and they carry purses of all sizes. It's just one of those situations. It's unfortunate that it happened, but we did put these in place in November, and we're learning from our experiences, unfortunately.
Is that something that you'd be amenable to a discussion with the city and with the police about either certain sizes or certain criteria?
I'd be fine with purses. Even backpacks that come through, we search them now. I think by putting this divestiture table, like as we're calling it right now, we put that to the side and allow people to relinquish control of their item and let us search it thoroughly, I think the problem gets solved quite easily at that point.
Okay. So now, once a guest has come in, and gone through the ID, gone through the magnetometer, paid the admission fee or whatever, they're then stamped or identified as being under 21 or over 21?
Correct. The ID checker will check the ID, and there's one more person inside with the stamp right next to him there.
How many people do you employ in kind of a security capacity on average?
Anywhere between 10 and 15 people.
And then that's separate and distinct from bartenders, bar backs, and
Yes.
wait staff?
Yes, that is.
So once I'm inside Razzles, how many different points, how many different bars are there where you could theoretically purchase a drink?
There's 4 bar structures, and behind those 4 bar structures, there are 12 stations.
And there are cameras inside the establishment?
Yes, there are.
I don't want you to give away anything can you tell us approximately how many cameras you have in the establishment?
Over 40,
Okay,
counting the exterior ones.
okay. And then, so if I go up and I buy a drink from one bartender, can the other bartender necessarily see me or anything like that?
Not if you go to the other side of the bar. With a 900 event capacity place, you have several areas that are not within eyesight of other areas.
Now, let's talk about your bartenders. Have they had any, as a condition of employment, do they get any kind of training or anything now about serving, and then is that going to change in the future, or are you implementing?
We do what's called responsible vendor training.
Okay.
That is a quarterly meeting that our bartenders and ID checkers attend, and that is done, like I said, I'm sorry, not quarterly, every 4 months. So it's done 3 times a year. It's done 3 times a year. It's about an hour and a half meeting, and they get updated on techniques, new trends, things like that this person has been trained to come in and do. In addition to that, I've also explored what's called tips training, and I've spoken to a instructor that does tips training. That is a certification that lasts 3 years that we're gonna require all our bartenders to have as well. So what that entails is another sit down through a course. You take a multiple choice exam, and at the end, you're given your certification.
And that's something you're going to be implementing post-haste?
Yeah, I've already received a quote from him, and we're getting the ball rolling. He's also going to provide us with third-party spotting so that they'll be sending people into the establishment to spot the bartenders.
Kind of like a secret shopper type?
Exactly, secret shopper.
And they'll report back to you if there's an issue, so you can then address it?
Yes.
I guess I want to talk with you a little bit about the security in the establishment. The people that you hire, they're your employees for security?
Yes, there are employees, but through a PEO.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you investigated hiring, I guess, private licensed security, or like, I forget, class something security guards?
We have looked into that. That was a result of us not getting our scheduled details on a consistent basis. So we have looked into that option as well, and many people have told us they do not do bars and clubs.
For liability reasons and a lot of different
I
things?
guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about scheduled details. I guess theoretically, there's 112 weekend nights in a year, more or less?
52 weeks times 2, 104
104.
that we have scheduled every year.
Okay. And you
All
request
the time.
police details for all of those weekends?
Yes, including some special dates that, like for instance, in March during Bike Week and spring break, certain nights we know that we're going to have bigger crowds. We may request additional details there, but 104 minimum, and anywhere from there up to 120.
In 2019, do you remember how many details you had filled by the city?
It was probably about 88.
Okay. And then in 2020, you recall how many?
It dropped. 2020 was a COVID year, so it was probably about 45, and we were closed for 6 months out of that year.
In 2021, do you know how many details?
There was a precipitous drop-off to 22.
Okay. And then so far this year, I think that brings up to this year.
22, I'm sorry, did you say 21 or
In-
22? 20 was 45.
Okay.
2021 was 22. 2022 was 11.
Okay. So last year was 11.
Yes.
And then, so like 10%.
Yeah.
And then this year so far, how many? You know?
This year so far, the number has gone back up. I think we're at 30-something. And that is, I think, as a result of them raising the price as well. So it gives the officers an opportunity to
Earn more.
to earn some more money.
And you're not allowed to contract directly with an officer or anything like that?
I'm not allowed to do that according to what they've told me.
Okay. Is it your preference to have police details?
Yes, it is.
And can you tell us why?
It just makes things easier. It creates a bridge from us to the city of Daytona Beach. We have an officer there, and we're able to give him a task that if something comes out to us, a disturbance, and we need to get somebody trespassed, the person is there immediately. Sorry, I keep turning away from the mic. So we're able to get that handoff, so to speak, immediately so that something doesn't erupt in the meantime.
And you've heard, obviously, the presentation of evidence and the concerns. As far as if you could reopen right away, are you going to just have security guards in the parking lots and things like that? How would you implement that?
Ironically, we already did, and then this emergency suspension was served on us. So
Let's kind of
we
jump.
did. We put them up on Saturday. We put 2 people out there, and then lo and behold.
And that was in response to the underage DUI that we were talking about?
No, response to that, and in response to our response to the shooting a couple of weeks ago, we just said, hey, let's go ahead and beef it up some more and do it.
So, and let's, I guess, talk about this procedurally. You were served with the August 10th notice. What time and day?
I guess it was around 8:45 p.m., 8:45 p.m. on Saturday evening,
Okay. All right.
which would be August 12th.
And so then, at that point, you shut down at midnight as far as the...
Yeah, it was served to my manager, who called me, and I was actually probably about 5 minutes away, so I must have just missed the chief. After that, I made some phone calls. I tried to get in contact with the chief and tried to get in contact with our city commissioner to discuss. I obviously wasn't in agreement that there was exigent circumstances about us being demonstrated danger at the time. But my conversations, I had a couple conversations, and then we did close at midnight that night on Saturday.
One of the things I want to talk with you about is kind of your business model and the idea that somehow this would all this would be solved. I don't want to denigrate their argument, but this would be ameliorated if just we didn't allow people under 21 into your establishment at all. Can you kind of address why that would be problematic and also unfair to you as a business owner?
Well, I've been asked this question many times before, and 18 is the age of majority. I understand that you cannot get an alcoholic beverage still at the age of 18, but you can go and enjoy a dance hall at the age of 18. And we do, by most standards, have a lot of people that just go in and do just that. So that's why I feel that it would be an unfair punishment, so to speak, or condition that would be predicated. I don't even know if it's a condition. It's asking somebody to change who they are at that point. So, and they're still going to be able to do that everywhere else in town. Now, as you alluded, if that's something that gets addressed by city commission or something and is done down the road, and that's what we have to abide by, that's what we have to abide by. We'll do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you heard Sergeant Blauer say something like, he estimated 30% of their calls were for people under 21. I mean, do you share that concern that the under 21 causes a disproportionate amount of mayhem in your establishment or outside of it?
I don't know if it's a disproportionate. I mean, we're talking about an age group primarily of 18 to 30. So if you really break it down, that's probably, if 30% of the problem is people 18 to 20 and the other 70 is 21 to 30 for the greater majority of our demographic, then that's probably about right.
You think that the enhanced ID scanning should help with this problem?
I certainly hope so. And I do think they do claim a 99.9% success rate. So if that is true, I think it will eliminate the problem. Not 100% though, by 0.01 no.
Yeah. You were shown, or we've shown you a kind of a list of requested conditions or things the city would like to see you implement kind of if you reopen with that permit?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the document I'm talking about?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I think it had, 8 or 9 enumerated things on it.
Yes.
And I'm going to kind of jump through some of these. I think it was 9. They struck number 8, which is the fire marshal issue. Let's kind of reverse order. Removal and rejection of customers who present to be clearly intoxicated,
Right.
not dragging out to the sidewalk. That's their language, not ours. Must clear your own property at bar closing. I mean, obviously, as a private business, you can't arrest people or trespass them without assistance of law enforcement. What are you going to do, or what's the procedure at closing hour for razzles, and how can we address this?
Look, I understand that there's a safety concern from the officers, and their goal is to get everybody out of the area as quickly as possible. Generally, at bar closing time, there's still places that are open for us, and even more so now that our hours have been rolled back to 2. One of the unintended consequences is I think bar closing hours has more people on the streets because it's an earlier closing hour. That's something that now we've been doing for about a year. So when you look at bar closing, there's pizza places that are open, and people meander down to these places and start eating and doing whatever. There's people waiting for Ubers. There's people, I would imagine, probably deciding whether they've had too much to drink to drive as well. I'm sure that some of that goes on as well. So if that's, I can rush them out. I can do whatever the city of Daytona Beach wants me to do when it comes to bar closing. However, there are other circumstances regarding that. There are other businesses there that are still open, and it's my understanding that there's an after-hours club again that's reopened as well. So that's been a product of us moving back to 2. So there are some challenges there, but it's not anything that, through the spirit of cooperation and corroboration, that we can help each other.
Okay. Number 7 was identification scanners. I think we've talked about this.
Right.
I guess as many employees that want to use the app can use it, right?
Yeah, it's basically an app at that point. You put your username and password in for your business, and you have access to it. It's done on iOS or Android. So our plan is to have iPhones in place with cases so that we protect the device, and then we'll be doing scanning just like when ABT comes in and does it. They'll probably be upset because they won't catch any IDs now.
And you can have that up and running today, tomorrow? And then-
Today, its contract has been signed. The first payment has been made.
Okay. I think you discussed this. Number 6 was some sort of training for when to stop serving patrons. You said you already have some training?
Yes.
And you're implementing more training?
Yes.
Okay, and that training is already going. How long would it take you to implement additional training?
He had to order the books, so he was going to get back to me and let me know when the books came in.
Okay, and we've talked about security staff in the parking lot, item number 5. That was already in place prior to the emergency shutdown.
It went into effect the same night of the emergency shutdown, actually, unbeknownst to that was coming to us.
Okay, and then item 4 was hired state licensed private security or police detail. We've discussed that. The business model, 21 and up, number 3, we've discussed that. The signage, you have no issue putting up signage to advise people as to whatever the new rules are, or whatever the new procedures are, right?
No, none at all.
And then the last one was the bags, which we've discussed.
Yeah, the bags, we can easily solve that problem.
Do you feel that your operation from 12 to 2 is a danger to the public?
No, I do not.
Okay. And I mean, the shooting was an isolated criminal act, correct?
Yes.
And this is probably one of the only times you've had something like this occur.
Yes. I mean, there have been usage of firearms, as you discussed, on Seabreeze. And when it happens, it affects us all. It doesn't just affect the business or the vicinity of where it happened directly.
And I guess in 2023, can you guess how many thousands of people have been through your establishment versus the one who brought in a gun that we know of?
This year?
Yeah.
2023, we're probably halfway through the year. 30, 40,000, 30,000 probably, 26 weeks, yeah.
So 1 out of 30,000, 40,000. And I guess there was some testimony from Sergeant Blowers about, people, concerned citizens calling in You get citizens calling you or expressing concern to you about underage drinking and things like that?
We have in the past, throughout the years, we have. Yes.
And your response is that you don't encourage that kind of business?
Well, we generally, if they would provide it for us, we've asked for photos of the individuals so that we can try and identify who it is, whether they're using a fake ID, to notify us if they know that they're trying to come that evening so that we can be prepared.
Okay.
So,
And do you consider yourself to be a cooperative with the police department when they need things from you?
yes, of course, always. I know that there's a requirement within the statute, and for us to provide the information within 3 days of written notice, we just don't even request that written notice. We just provide it immediately.
In fact, I think you said that you allow the police officer direct access to your database.
Yeah, there's a former employee of ours who's currently a detective with Daytona Beach Police Department. Whenever he needs video, he will come in, and we leave him in the office, and he does the same.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. I would tender the witness.
Okay. Mr. Jackson, do you have any questions for the witness?
Yes, Mr. Dramonis, how you doing? I guess we're at
Good, sir.
point of afternoon this
Have we made it there? Oh, boy.
So you're one of the owners.
Technically, I'm a manager. My parents are the owners of Seabreeze 611. I operate the business for them.
Okay.
Yes.
You're aware of the extended hours
Yes. Yes, sir.
provisions, both in the agreement, the permit itself, as well as what's in our code?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you realize under Section 5B of that Article 10-3 B5, it's Section B5, that's where it says that the ability to remain open and sell, the ability to remain open and sell or permit the consumption of alcoholic beverages beyond midnight is a privilege, and no establishment may reasonably rely on a continuation of the privilege? You realize that's there?
Yes, sir, I do.
And further, as a condition of this privilege, establishments dealing in alcoholic beverages are required to take all necessary and reasonable steps to minimize the negative impacts that their establishments may cause in their nearby residents or commercial neighborhoods.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's something you'll, I presume, try to do?
Yes, sir. Necessary and reasonable.
Okay. Now, you realize that even though there was, you've been working on it, that there had been an event prior to the driving event, that there was a shooting.
Yes, sir.
And that did create some concern about public danger, in a sense, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And y'all recognize that it started taking some actions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's get to this point. You've said, I want to ask you about the metal detector so I can understand it better. You said that it buzzes on one side. What happens when it doesn't buzz? So you don't know of that.
These are Garrett walkthrough, similar to the ones that you see in an airport
Okay.
or a sporting event. These are the same ones that are used in some NFL stadiums as well. So on one side, you have a green light showing a icon of a walking person. As you walk through that metal detector, that side flashes red, telling the next person, wait.
Okay.
As that person passes through and is done with their scan, that side turns green. On the other side of the metal detector, you have two translucent white bars on each side running up and down the side. And they have LEDs within those translucent bars. Depending on where metal detector detects a secondary search area,
Okay.
a zone will light up on that metal detector, indicating where you need to do a more thorough inspection.
Okay, and right now, a more thorough inspection is what?
So that's when we have our secondary guy who's directing the traffic through the metal detector. He also has in his hand a Garrett handheld metal detector. So what he would do then at that point is direct the person. In the case of males, like I said, most of them are usually wearing pants or jeans of some kind or shorts. We ask them to empty their pockets if the zone is here. There's people that have come through with steel-tip boots, so the zone will be at the very bottom. It tells you, look there. So you search in their boot to make sure there's not a weapon, and it's just the boot, for instance, that's setting it off. That's kind of how it would work for males. Females, same thing in terms of zone, where to look, and of course the additional search is the female purse, because females carry purses. So,
Okay, well, typically go weekly to court, so between the belt, the shoes, the wallet, I understand that. So here's my question. The extent of the follow-up, wouldn't it be prudent to have them go through again after you detect whatever it is that's causing the machine to go off?
the
and ensure-
handheld is the secondary inspection.
Okay.
And the handheld is highly accurate as you hold it along the entire body, anywhere along the body.
Was a handheld used regarding the shooting incident then, ultimately?
I'm not certain if the handheld was used as well.
But that's something that you want
I
to
don't
implement
recall
into the
it.
practice? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can do a full wand as well, along with the divestiture of the bag, as we called it on the table.
Wouldn't you agree it's a good idea to at least assure yourself you know why it's going off?
Well, the zone would precipitate you having to necessarily do the entire body. That's the purpose of the zone, indicating here is where the concern is
Okay.
on the metal detector.
Okay. Have you ever, you had mentioned the novelty ID issue that y'all
Yes,
have
sir.
dealt with. Have you ever turned someone away or not permit them because they have I understand you can't take it from them,
Mm-hmm.
but have you turned someone away and not allowed them to enter
Every weekend,
because they have a novelty ID?
because they've been somehow determined to have a fake ID. It's more than just the ID, it's demeanor, you can tell if they start to get nervous. There's things that we have been trained to see throughout the course of our years here, that somebody is using a fake ID. It's not a perfect science.
Okay. But you are getting better scanners and doing some training to ensure that everyone has the same.
As far
level
as I've seen, and in terms of satisfying my due diligence with the state of Florida and with the city of Daytona Beach, if I'm using the same devices that the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco is using, I'm perfectly assured that I think we'll be able to comply, no problem here.
Well, I can tell you this is what we've asked for, so I'm not complaining about it.
No
I'm just
problem.
saying-
No, I
allow me to
understand.
finish, because I know the reporter don't like us both talking.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned a divesting table, and tell me about that a little more.
We would put a table to the side of the metal detector. We have some open area there that would allow us to place a table there. So anyone that needs to have a secondary search done can just go over there, put their personal items on the table. You can do the wand search of the person. You can search the bag as well.
And I'm understanding you right, it's the perspective that any size bag should be able to go. Does it matter, or?
Generally speaking, I mean, people aren't bringing suitcases to the bar. Let's talk realities here. But sometimes people do bring backpacks. Either they've come from work or they're doing something. They have backpacks. So we'll search the backpacks. And if there's any items that we do not like in there, we just tell them to take them something. They can't bring them in. So, but if we need to ban backpacks, we can, but I think with the use of a divesting table, you can conduct a search of a luggage, piece of suitcase, to be quite honest with you at that point. It's not going to get to that, but once you separate the person from the property and you can actually search it thoroughly, you eliminate probably 99.9% of your problems, I would think, at that point.
Okay, you were asked about the security, and you said people in a security capacity. What does that mean?
Security, that's strictly what they're, I mean, the old classic term is bouncer. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so when you say the number that you have, these are the folks who are going around and making sure things stay in order and.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, and you plan to implement this tips training you mentioned as well? with
Yes,
this
sir. It's
other
already in the works.
Okay, a little bit more enhanced training in terms of knowledge and information.
Well, it gives them a certification, the bartender, for 3 years. That goes with them. If they cease operating at our establishment, that is for the bartender to take wherever they go for their next job as well. So it's in addition to that. So if someone comes in that has the tips training already, we would not require it of them. If we're hiring somebody new that does not have it, we would just require them to get it at that point.
You realize there are other provisions of this code that would allow us to seek grounds for suspension and other things?
Yes, sir.
More
Through-
related to the terms of the permit itself or general violations of law?
Yes, sir. Through a notice and an opportunity to cure, I understand the ordinance quite well.
And this circumstance is a circumstance dealing with what, at least from the perspective of our agency, or specifically the perspective of the chief, dealing with a demonstrated danger to the public or health, safety, and welfare.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Actually, I don't have any other questions of you.
Okay.
We don't have any redirect.
Anything further?
Yeah, I would like to, I mean, ultimately, was the chief's decision. He's available. I'd like to allow the chief, if there's no objection to that, to come in and
Yeah, we don't
just
have
kinda
any more
basically
evidence.
redirect.
We're done with our presentation, so.
So,
Do you have any objection to the chief?
No, if he wants to recall, or he wants to call someone.
Chief Young?
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Jakari Young, Chief of Police.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
And if I can, I'm just asking in general for the chief to address. So what do you have?
So, good afternoon, Mr. Magistrate. Jakari Young, Chief of Police. When we first started this hearing this morning, you asked for clear and compelling evidence that led to the suspension of the after-hours permit. And I am of the opinion that you have received that clear and compelling evidence that led to the suspension. Focusing on July 22nd, that is the date that I had 4 individuals shot in the parking lot of Razzles. And there's no dispute about whether or not that gun was allowed inside of the club. So we have asked for several stipulations, but one that I'm really surprised about, I didn't expect the 21 and over. I really didn't expect that, as far as actually making a change there to being 21 and up. But I'm really surprised that there's an argument or any sort of pushback regarding bags being allowed in the club. Because most people that come to the club, I would say, drive or ride with someone. So why wouldn't we just leave those bags in the car? What's the difference in securing them inside of the trunk of your vehicle versus bringing them in and putting them off to the side somewhere? To me, that just doesn't make any sense. When you have a young lady that comes in with a full-size 9mm weapon, why would we even want to risk that moving forward? That part, to me, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, just moving forward, Mr. Delgado questioned the date of the suspension, and I would like to just provide some clarity. It was my intent to move forward and suspend this extended hours permit prior to what happened with the 17-year-old. It was actually my intent to suspend it more closer to the shooting that occurred on June 22nd. Because when I look at that shooting that occurred, and we live in the era of an active shooter, I've lost count of how many active shooting incidents we've had just this year. So just the mere thought of someone making it inside of that club with a loaded firearm makes me cringe. So I went to move forward with the suspension even prior to the 17-year-old. But if you remember, or maybe you don't know, we didn't make an immediate arrest. It was several days later before we actually arrested the suspect that was responsible for the shooting. And then there's follow-up that needs to be conducted. So before I would move forward with a suspension in reference to the shooting, I wanted to make sure we had our ducks in a row. So then I'm also not going to act as a renegade and just do this on my own. I wanted to meet with city legal and make sure that I had the authority to move forward with the suspension. I also wanted to meet with the city manager and make sure he approved of we moving forward with the suspension. So it resulted in us, we were supposed to meet on Monday about this, but then when I learned of what happened in the parking lot on August 11th, I said enough is enough. We're not going to wait until Monday. We're going to move forward with the suspension. And that's why we showed up Saturday night and we moved forward with it. So that therein clears up the discrepancy as far as the date, because to me, that's all that is that's a discrepancy. I want to talk about my staffing for a minute. It's been widely publicized that I have some vacancies throughout the department, but I've told all members of my department, specifically my command staff and supervisors, that staffing may be an issue, but it's not an excuse. We have to figure out how to do what we need. We have to figure out how to better serve our community, even if we're running a little bit short. So that's why I have allowed my supervisors to hire as much overtime as need be to make sure that we have enough officers to be effective in serving the community. So the night of the shooting, for example, I had 11 officers total for the beat side. As the police chief, when I heard of the shooting, my first thought was, okay, well, where were the officers when it occurred? I think that's a logical thought. Okay, you got all these folks working, where are they? So I pulled the CAD report, and all 11 cops were already assigned to a call for service. Call for service meaning anytime you call 911 or anytime you call the non-emergency number, it generates a call for service. All 11 cops, with the exception of one, the exception of one that was on his meal break at the time that shooting occurred. He came in service from his meal break and responded to razzles. The point I'm making here is because this is a very busy city, that is the importance of having competent security personnel, because we will never be everywhere all the time. It's not going to happen. All I'm asking for is accountability. When there's a shooting that occurs in this city and I'm notified of the shooting, I get a sickening feeling in my stomach because I go through this process of, where were we? Was there anything we could have done to prevent it? What measures can we put in place to prevent these shootings from occurring in the future? And I've reached a point that I need management to have that same sickening feeling in their stomach, and I need them to run through that same process of what they could have done to avoid it and not push everybody out of the club, close the doors, and go in the back somewhere and count the money. We need their staff to work with us in the parking lot. That is the common denominator here. Both incidents were in the parking lot in almost the exact same spot. We didn't get a chance to pull up the video, but if we were to watch the videos, you would see both incidents with the 17-year-old and the DUI arrest after backing in the cops and patrons, and the shooting literally occurred almost in the exact same spot. So all we're asking for is to have additional people, their staff, out there monitoring that parking lot as a deterrent. No, they're not police officers. I don't expect them to take the law into their own hands. But a uniformed security officer will go a long way just as a deterrent. And that is what we are asking for, because again, we cannot be everywhere all at one time. I want to move forward and talk a little bit about the underage drinking. I know Mr. Dramonis. I've known him my entire career. I've known him for about 22 years. I don't know any of the other owners of any bars. He's the only one that I know. So I would say we have a relationship. I had a meeting with him and his brother, who's also the co-owner, in reference to complaints that I was receiving in reference to underage drinking. I don't remember the date of that meeting, but I also don't believe Mr. Dramonis to be a liar, so I don't think he would disagree that this meeting occurred. It was in April sometime that we had this meeting. And he acknowledged, thank you for the heads up, you know, we're gonna try to do better, we're gonna do things differently to try to get ahead of what's going on. Because these are the things, these are the phone calls that are coming in to me. So the question I have is, after that meeting, that was in April sometime, we're just now getting to the point to where we're implementing these ID readers. And that's what I have an issue with, because we met back in April about this, but we're just now implementing these ID readers. And I'm also kind of curious to know, what is the status of the employee that was working the door when that gun was missed? Because we can have 50 million metal detectors, we can have 50 million wands, but it's all about accountability. Without accountability, policy, training, supervision, it's meaningless. We need folks in place that have a sense of urgency about where we are right now as far as gun violence, and that are gonna do thorough checks of bags, anything. That's why I was trying to make it easy and just say, let's do away with the bags. If we do away with the bags, it's kind of hard to hide a gun on your person, you know, be it missed. Sometimes it does happen, but it's a lot easier if we do away with the bags. Another point I'd like to make, they talk about the detail and the lack of police officers that sign up for the detail. I will have you know that our partners at the sheriff's office, they don't even work bars and clubs. I can't tell you the exact reason they don't work bars and clubs, but I would surmise that because of the liability that comes with working these bars and clubs, they'd rather stay away from it. So I think Lieutenant Gernert has already done a good job just talking about the assistance that some of the officers receive at the other bars that they haven't been receiving at Razzles. If that changes, maybe we will get more cooperation, because that's not something that I can mandate. I cannot mandate my officers to work that establishment in their off time. I cannot make that mandate. But if that changes, I think that we may potentially see the cooperation improve. I had a list of things, but I think that's...
And
Thank you.
if anyone feel they have any questions, I don't have any questions, so that's enough for me.
Yes, Chief, as far as the shooting at the bar, that, I guess, other than not having any bags in the facility, I mean, people miss things in a search all the time, right?
Correct.
I mean, you're not going to fire a police officer who doesn't find narcotics on a suspect to get it to the jail necessarily. Are you suggesting we should have fired the guy at the front desk? Or are you just curious?
I'm curious to know what retraining has taken place. I didn't suggest that the guy is terminated, the guy or girl is terminated. But I'm curious to know about what retraining took place,
Okay.
as far as to ensure that that wouldn't occur moving forward.
Is that something that, I mean, could we get the Daytona Beach Police Department to come out and offer training to some of these people if there was, is that something you guys would be willing to do?
That's something we can discuss.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned you have a relationship with Mr. Dramonis. He's been in communication with you over the years about different issues. Would you feel confident that if he said he would meet with you and try to hash out some of these issues, that he would actually do that and work
Yes.
with you? As far as the purse issue goes and the bags, I mean, part of that concern was just as a lawyer, it's very difficult to start saying, well, you know, this is okay. I mean, obviously, I think people want to bring their driver's license, their cell phone, things like that. So my concern as a lawyer is I just want to make sure we have I don't want to come back in a month and you say, well, you said a small bag, and there's a big, that's why I think we just need to have some clear guidance, because people do need to bring something in, right?
Right.
So that was what, I think the clear bags or something like that, something that we can work around. Again, I think these are all things that you agree could probably be worked out with Mr. Dramonis?
Yes.
Okay. And I think the only issue I brought up as far as the DUI thing was that was just something that was not in the initial notice. I understand now how the timing, so the shooting is really kind of the main precipitating event for all.
Absolutely.
Okay. And obviously, that woman's being prosecuted for attempted murder, and she broke several laws by bringing the gun into the
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear the testimony from my client about the new ID solution they're going to have as far as the IntelliCheck and things like that?
Yes, I'm curious to know more about it.
Okay.
And I'm kind of interested to know if the training has already taken place to make sure that those responsible for scanning these IDs, I would like to make sure they can show proficiency in how to operate this equipment to make sure folks are turned away that try to get in with
Fake ID.
fake IDs.
Okay. Is that IntelliCheck something that's known in the police? Is that a brand name or something you know about?
That's not something that I know about. No.
Okay, all right. If they said it's what the Bureau of Alcohol uses, is that maybe, that's not a police department, that's a separate agency, right?
That's a separate agency.
Okay.
correct.
All right. Would you accept my client's representation that he will work to make these changes as quickly as possible?
Like I said, I've known him a long time, so I have no reason not to believe that even moving forward past this hearing, we can't continue to communicate and work through, the issues.
Thank you, Chief. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Chief.
Do you want to hear about the retraining of that employee? Is that something that you're concerned about?
Mr. Jackson?
I'm not. I think the ultimate is at some point, what we're going to need to be able to do is just verify that we went through a checklist that we're satisfied with and some time factors of satisfaction on that. And I know that's going to be part of what as we close out, that's going to be part of the point here. If I may.
You may.
I don't have any more evidence. I don't know if you have nothing else to present, I'll be ready and willing to summarize. If I can go ahead and start.
One thing I would like to run by, I'm hearing, it seems like there's a convergence here. Obviously, a business owner wants to be open. And the city has offered various improvements, conditions that could allow the business to be open. Right now, if I'm correct, it's closed.
Closed after midnight, yeah.
And I would like to see resolution, if it's at all possible, today. Something that you all can agree upon and that can then be finalized and bring this matter to a close rather than come back a week later, a month later. I think there is a sense of urgency on all sides. And I would like, before you start to summarize, to consider this option, and you may disagree, but to take a break, let's say 3 hours or so, and then reconvene, let's say at 3 or 3:30, and have a list of conditions that could then be incorporated in the order, and this matter's closed out. And if there's reoccurrence, well, then that's a separate thing.
Need a moment?
Yeah, I need just a brief moment. I like to actually talk to someone.
Reconvene at, let's say, 12:45. Recess. And I call this proceeding back to order.
Mr. Magistrate, Aaron Delgado on behalf of Razzles. I think that I appreciate the time that was given. I know we ran a little far. It was productive. I think we've reached a resolution. What we'd like to do is basically, we've come up with a list of things that Razzles can do, and once they show and show compliance and be able to reopen, with the understanding that you're going to retain jurisdiction for 7 days to enforce any, if we don't actually do it or there's some violation of what we've agreed upon. In essence, as far as the number one condition number one, the bags, we're going to agree to a definition of a bag with a certain size. I think it was 6 by 4 by 2 or something like that. I'm sorry? 592, which is, I guess, drawn from like the Major League Baseball definition. And, that will be the size bag that's permitted. We're going to, in addition to having the metal detectors, and as you heard testimony about, we're going to ask people to divest themselves of their bag, which means that when they come in, if the metal detector goes off, they're going to put their bag on a table. They won't have access to it. They won't be able to manipulate it. Our security will go through it with a flashlight or whatever and make sure that anything illicit or weapon is found, and that's going to be that. The second condition was the signage. We're going to put all those signs up. The signs may not be in their final form. They may be a temporary sign while we're having, metal durable signs manufactured, but there will be signage up as soon as possible.
And as to, just refresh my memory, signage as to what?
As to know about the bag restriction,
Okay.
no alcohol outside, no alcohol consumption in the parking lot. The alcohol outside would be placed on the inside of the facility so people leaving would know they can't take their drinks out. The signage is already there, but we're going to, it's already there. And then there'll be.
If I can say
Yeah.
this, if you have the list from when we talked about conditions before, it's basically going down that conditions list.
Right, I'm
Okay.
sorry if that wasn't clear. And then in the parking lot, there'll be signs that say, no alcohol in the parking lot and, move along, et cetera. We're going to draft some signage. There's issue number 3, I think we're not going to address we're going to leave things as far as the age of operation. As far as the state licensed security, we're going to work with the city to be more enticing of an employer for the security details in the city, but we're also going to work with our existing people to offer them better training and things like that, but there's not going to be a requirement of any, hiring of a private firm or anything like that. What we are going to agree to is item 5, that there will be specific staff members assigned to the parking lot. On our low frequency nights, which is basically everything but Friday, Saturday, and special events, we will have at least one roving security guard security member, staff security at all times. While open, they'll be patrolling the parking lot during Fridays and Saturdays and rolling over into, early morning Sunday, as well as during special events or peak time, we'll have at least 2 people in the parking lot. We're going to implement voluntarily the enhanced tips training for the bartenders inside, as well as to continue the training from the vendor. So that will address any issues about serving as set out in condition 6. Item number 7, we're going to have the scanners on cell phones. We have everything in place now, except we don't have the logins. We should have that shortly today. So we'll just need to show that to the Daytona Beach Police Department, but we've already kind of agreed that'll be sufficient. Item 8 was struck by agreement because the fire marshal has jurisdiction whenever. And then as far as number 9, I think we're going to work with we're going to have a conversation with the Daytona Beach Police Department about how they want us to work with them at closing time. They recognize that as private citizens, there's limits to what our staff can do. And there's also a benefit if someone needs to take a little bit of time to decide, should they drive? They decide they shouldn't drive, they call a cab. If they're meeting with their friends and someone's going to, call a cab, we want them to linger and not just immediately jump in their car and drive off, possibly intoxicated. So we're going to work, that's a conversation we're going to have with someone from the City of Daytona Beach Police Department about how we can help them and how we can lower their need for their kind of police response, but also make sure that we're following the law, we're treating our customers with respect, but we're also encouraging them to be safe and not to drink and drive or leave the property prematurely. So I think that addresses the issues set out in conditions 1 through 9, striking 8. Am I correct, Mr. Jackson?
That's correct. That's what we discussed.
And
I
three,
guess-
yeah.
And we all agree to that. And so it really brings down, the ultimate question on 10. And what we'd like to do is utilizing Sergeant Blowers to be able to go and verify with satisfaction and check off these items with verification, allow the magistrate to maintain jurisdiction for a week. And if for some reason they're not in compliance to these things that we've discussed, then we will come back and I believe their request is a request that they be able to be reinstated. Upon our communication, our verification, we would find them in compliance in the same manner we typically would in administrative proceedings, send that notice to the magistrate of compliance, and then they would be presumed allowed, because our main issue and our only issue here is to eliminate the demonstrated dangerous conditions. So if these things are done, we believe that puts us in place to be able to say we're satisfied for this circumstance.
Okay. As to the existing suspension, does that continue in place until these items are done? Or what was your discussion on that?
Like, yes.
To the point of us giving a check off and a notification to you that it's done, then they're lifted. So we'll have our inspector. They really feel that he can satisfy the things that Sergeant Blowers need to satisfy by the end of the week. But we'll see. But whenever they do, they'll check them off and we'll go from there. Okay, all right. We obviously we went back and forth and
A lot of discussions over the last couple of days.
So I'll let
And I don't want to misspeak, Mr. Gross, correct me if I'm wrong. The idea was that it would be lifted today. We could reopen with the show compliance today. And if we don't show compliance or we violate within the 7 days, then it would have emergency powers to step right back in, and with no need to renotice the hearing. Is that what we?
If I can.
Mr. Gross, could you kind of help us?
Hi, Mr. Ritchie of Ben Gross, City Attorney. What we talked about is having you retain jurisdiction so that if they reopen and we can't confirm that they've met their conditions by the weekend, we'd be back here next week.
Okay, but I'm just concerned about, I know that your client would probably like to be open sooner rather than later.
Right, so
And how that relates to all of this, because it's a kind of a two-way street. You're implementing things, but there may be issues regarding whether they can be done quickly or not. And I just want to be able to have a clear and concise order so that I can look at it and say, okay, we lift the suspension today and we give you 7 days or whatever to do it, or that we have you leave the suspension in place and say it will be lifted after 7 days or whenever they're done. I just want to, the timing is kind of critical because I don't want to come back and have to argue over the meaning of the words. I want so that everybody, it's unambiguous.
the city's expectation, Mr. Riggio, is if you look at the conditions, item 1 would be implemented immediately. Item 2 would be implemented immediately. Item 5 would be implemented immediately. Item 7 would be implemented immediately. And the other items would need to be in place that were mentioned within the next 7 days. And if they're not in place, you would retain jurisdiction with everybody's agreement, and we would come back for a rehearing.
Okay.
Is
Now,
that acceptable?
Right.
okay, but when does the business open?
Business can open tonight, provided that everything that has to happen immediately is documented as happening before tonight.
Okay.
Before 5 o'clock.
Thank you for the time is important because we're not getting
And
into.
keep our provision from the agency acknowledging those things are satisfied. That will be from Sergeant Block.
Okay. All right. Then essentially, and Mr. Delgado, just so you're aware, from what I've heard of the testimony and the witnesses and the evidence, I find that there would be a finding as provided for under the ordinance that there was substantial competent evidence of what is the magic wording that's in there, that there was a demonstrated danger to the health, safety, and welfare, and then you say, add the additional language that you all now have come up with as a condition so that we deal with all of that. Any objection to that?
That's fine, Judge.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take a shot at this. And what I'm going to probably need from you is the list that you just went through so that I can tack it on here.
It's in the court file.
I have this document.
That's what we refer.
But I think you've made some slight revisions to all of that, and I want to have your revised version, not the one that is, because some of these things, let me just take a stab at it, and you'll see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, yeah, because we didn't revise it, we clarified a couple of things as to those number of people in the parking lot and those types of things. So, yeah, we'll
Yeah, I want your version that you have agreed on, because that's fine with me, but my pen doesn't work that fast to write all that
Can we
down.
just say as stated on the record in open hearing?
That's fine.
Okay.
That-
So
that's
then
a
I think
good way
that
of
would
doing it.
capture, if you would just rule that if we, if we comply with the things as stated on the record in the hearing, that, that
and I can agree with that. I don't have any objection to that.
we have a court reporter, so it's a pretty clear record of what was said and done.
Okay, and there was one that you did strike. Was that number 3?
No, we struck number 8, and that was because it was a
Number 8.
examination of the fire marshal, which is something that the fire marshal has the authority to do by statute, so we didn't
Okay,
make
well,
that.
number 3 was the changing of the business model, and I don't recall hearing anything
That's
about
not,
that.
that's not an issue. That's been
Yeah,
struck.
As, I think from the communication from the chief, understanding where that stood us in general, yeah, we're fine with that being considered, let them maintain as is.
So 3 is not
You can call it stricken, yeah. that-
stricken.
it's as
Okay,
is.
yeah.
And
I just want to make it easy so everybody can just do what they need to do and be done with it.
Mr. DePaula made a good suggestion. What if we just said by agreement of the parties, we've reached this compromise and that it, defer delayed, retain jurisdiction for 7 days. Then if we have it done, then it can just be dismissed
fine.
at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because this was really a consensus building effort by the parties. So it's not really, I don't necessarily think that we want to have a finding or something. We would prefer there not be a finding, more just this was done by consensus from my side.
I don't know if we can not have a finding.
We agreed. We're not disputing. We're conceding. It's a consensus building. Come on, Tony. That's the buzzword of the day. Consensus. I just don't want. When I said that I would agree to that, I don't want to prejudice my client by saying I'm stipulating some finding. It was our hope that we would just say that the parties have agreed to retain jurisdiction and to resolve that we would implement these things.
I guess the difficulty I have with that is that we ended up having a hearing, and we had a hearing in full.
But we
And
settled it before
we're
the.
settling on the ultimate outcomes, and that's fair, but
I guess we're continuing it really for. We're kind of.
No, because as I see it, the suspension ends at what, on the 4th day at midnight? And so I don't know that there is an option to continue it other than by having an order that provides for the ability to have a finding and then have the steps to basically implement that finding. So therefore, Having said that, I hereby order that in case number 1, DBA Razzle/Seabreeze 611 Inc., care of Jeddick Associates, that based on the sworn testimony and exhibits, substantial competent evidence has been presented which supports a finding that the establishment's operation presents a demonstrated danger to the health, safety, and welfare of the public as identified in the notice, and that the business owner has responsibly agreed to immediately implement the conditions as stated in open hearing on whatever today's date is, August 16th in Daytona Beach, and that with respect to these items 1, 2, 5, and 7 will be implemented immediately, and and upon satisfaction of that being done, the business can reopen for business, and that items 3, 4, 6, 8, 9, or 8. No, 8 is struck in.
8 and 3 is struck too. I
Yes.
It's reinstating the app.
9 and 10, or no, well, 9, because 10 is no longer necessary. 9 will be implemented within the next 7 days, and that
License.
the special magistrate in this matter retains jurisdiction to, for reconsideration of any item which is not completed within the approved or the agreed-upon time period.
And I guess just for, we can open, it's just the after-hours permit is reinstated, right? I mean, that's, because we're not
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
it closed.
we don't.
All right, right.
You're not ordered to close.
Right.
So we'll be a reinstatement of the after-hours permit allowing you to operate under the obvious conditions that's
Right.
provided.
Okay.
And
And of course, we don't, and they understand this and everyone else, that we're not waiving any of the authority to.
And I can put on, and may consider imposing at the very end, additional suspension if these items are not completed as agreed upon.
Okay. All right.
Anything else?
Everybody excused?
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Then this hearing is concluded today.
I grew up right here in Midtown, and I ran up and down these streets as a kid. And you know, I enjoyed it. Great buildings, tremendous people with a sense of community, wonderful businesses. And as an artist now, I gained from that